Oui. Non, si. Maintenant, c'est sur le Low Country Society. On a 6 abonnés qui nous attendent. C'est bon.
Yes, madame.
Oh, c'est bon. Ouais, c'est bon.
You can get through. Yes, you get it?
I have it in a separate link, but I have it in the same link, but in two. But normally, it's all good.
Can you cancel the hearing?
Ah, j'ai un live.
Voilà, c'est bon.
C'est un lien séparé.
Voilà, c'est pas grave. C'est sur le canal.
Good start. Welcome to you all. Good afternoon. I'm very glad that we can start this afternoon on a very complex theme, which the family is going to start to introduce, and then from the new combined world, and then together, will then continue to try and make some form of beginning and possibility, work out the complexities.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank Leon and Jean-Dominique for this kind invitation. And now I will focus on something special, domestic furniture with sculpture, a complex challenge. Team building avant la lettre, or a conglomerate of specialized craftsmen. That the making of domestic furniture with sculpture in the southern Netherlands was extremely complex is beyond dispute. This given the strict craft regulations regarding the capacities of the many craftsmen and the protection of their employment. During the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, the regulations changed repeatedly. But there were also geographical differences between the towns of Brabant or France. But for the sake of clarity, this lecture will focus on Antwerp. First, there is a distinction between carpenters and joiners. Carpenters were responsible for the manufacture of nail-fixed and roughly cut furniture without decoration. Joiners, on the other hand, deserve all our attention. They were the ones who were in charge of non-nail fixed furniture or the sophisticated towards reclining and seating furniture. But not only joiners got the job done. Various subordinate craftsmen each contribute their own. As early as the beginning of the 16th century, chest makers came to the fore with manufacture of cases and chests. Of great importance were the Spanish chair makers, who made the Spanish chairs of or the later Baroque seating par excellence from the late 16th century onwards. In the same period, the specialized ebony woodworkers appeared, who took care of the lion's share of the luxurious cabinets, glued with exotic ebony wood until the second half of the 18th century. But the inlay work from colored woods that brightened up various pieces of furniture as refined decoration had to be carried out by the specialized inlays. These craftsmen decorated furniture with foliage, figures, and landscapes, this from the second half of the 16th century onwards. In the latter 18th century, they are known with the French word marketeur and they would produce the inlay work with wood and various metals and model of them. However, who took care of the carvings that ended up on domestic furniture? Immediately, a distinction should be made between the carvings and sculptures that brighten up the furniture. Both low relief and semi-detached sculptures were applied to furniture by the so-called antiques makers, according to a renewed provision from 1539. This carving could be carried out according Den Oude and the Modernity. You can see that on the top. Most likely, this indicates Gothic tracery and carving on the one hand, or Renaissance motifs such as masks, vases, festoons, and dungeons. More fully round sculpture, such as angels' heads, mythological and allegorical figures, animals, and not to mention sieraden met een ordonnantiën, were executed by sculptors in the 17th and 18th century. Perhaps the latter decoration referred to the correct use of architectural order. After all, furniture and architecture were related. Both antique carvings and sculptures were not part of the overarching cabinet maker or joiner's guild, but they did belong to the illustrious and powerful St. Luke's Guild, which brought together and represented the artists. If a master cabinet maker seemed capable of carrying out any carvings or sculpture or furniture himself, he had to become a member of the Guild of St. Luke and pay an entrance fee as well as an annual fee to the guild. For the guild board considered carving and sculpture, and I quote now, as a room within the house of many arts. Such hair-splitting regarding craft bars often landed to discussion. Just one single example. The specialized inlayers themselves use pen, brush, paints, and ink to create the drawing or the design for the artist's inlay work in the furniture. This was not a liking of the Guild of St. Luke, because the use of pens, brushes, and paints, as well as the design of figurative images, belonged to the guild's remit. Consequently, inlayers also had to acquire membership of the St. Luke's Guild. Another point, training the workaholics, training or schooling and master examination of craftsmen, also something special. Quality was a hallmark for furniture from the 16th to the 18th century. Consequently, the dean and elders of the craft strictly supervised the training of their companions before they were admitted to the master's examination. Usually, the apprenticeship was 4 years, which the future master had to complete with a recognized free master. Almost no training contracts of joiners and their many respective subordinates have survived. However, it is known that they had to be able to properly handle the typical instruments of their craft, you see here, such as various planes, saws, porches, drills, chop hooks, shooters, pipes, etc. But using pointed compasses on top, you see, to determine precise angles and dimensions was very important. Why? For handling this tool indicated that the working methods were considered as a science, and not pure craftsmanship. Still very important to the way the joiners and other subordinate crafts work was the use of glue. Glue was also a privilege over which many a lawsuit was fought, and a glue pot and the top of it, and a blue pot is thus proudly depicted as real trophy on the title page of Hans Tregeman de Vries Modelboek for furniture. For the training of the anti-carvers and sculptors, several apprenticeship contracts did survive. For instance, the training with a free master anti-carver sculpture usually lasted 3 years. They often received board and lodging. As novice apprentices, they were sometimes allowed to cut speculaas boards. Those are boards for some biscuits. In the evening as an exercise and at their own expenses. According to the same contracts, working hours were long, namely from sunrise to sunset. And to ensure the quality of the workpieces, they were not allowed to work by candlelight. When the training period ended, the future anti-carver or sculptor took his master's exam. Very important for the training of the future sculpture was drawing. This art of drawing was taught in the 16th and first half of the 17th century by the free master who was training the future sculptor. Afterwards, in 1664, lessons in drawing were mainly taken over by courses at the Antwerp Royal Academy, which we will not discuss in more detail. Fortunately, Antwerp master tests for joiners from the various centuries are known. In the 16th century, for instance, they were asked to make a trésor. You see that on the left, whether or not embellished with carvings. In the 17th century, it concerned a double bay with 4 doors. The contemporary drawing of this has been preserved. On it, one discovered not only angle columns and geometric moldings on 4 doors, but a sculpted angel's head is attached in the central curve. During the 18th century, the master test consisted of making a commode, again a French word, with 4 drawers, but its appearance is kept in the dark. The master tests for the other underlings of the cabinet maker's craft is known only approximately. For instance, ebony woodworkers had to make a cabinet out of ebony, or an ebony frame for a mirror. Inlayers had to make a panel with inlayer. Which master tests the sculptures had to pass, unfortunately, cannot be clearly identified. After passing the master's exam, which was checked by the dean and several elders, the candidates could work as free masters on payment of a high entry fee. For some people, this was financially too hard, and they continued to work as unfree master in the service of the free master. Next. So, a wide range of furniture with carvings in 3 successive centuries. Grazing through household inventories and craft ordinances, supplemented by contemporary iconography, a diverse range of furniture passes of ours. In the archives, certain furniture types are given an adjective referring to their foreign origins, such as Spanish chairs, German chests, Parisian benches, alongside old-school cabinets, and so. Antwerp was indeed an international metropolis, so this should not be surprised. From the vast array of storage, reclining, and sitting furniture, according to the seminar, only the furniture that could be decorated with carving or sculpture was selected. They were all described as gestoken, what means carved, or sculpture. And this slide shows you all the names of the different types of furniture from 16th, 17th, and 18th century. As decorations for storage furniture, customers in the 16th century preferred human figures, circus, as well as columnar halls in the 17th, see up on the right. The decor was expanded to include lion and angel heads, runs, allegorical and mythological figures. Of high quality are the three-dimensional allegorical caryatids, often gilded or polychrome, which were included in the basis of the luxurious Antwerp cabinets of the 17th century, as well as the smaller sculptures on top of these cabinets. Sculptures from the workshop of Peter de Brugge or Architect Linus executed these sculptures. In the 18th century, typical French decorum takes the upper hand, now especially on the new fangled commodes, bureaux, cabinet, bibliothèque, et canapé. This according to the prevailing Louis styles. Our colleague Jean-Dominique will elaborate. Gilding and metal decoration also made their appearance. The beds were often equipped with exuberant carvings according to the household inventories. Not only architectural elements such as columns or caryatids with or without sculpture, but also eagles and apples were used to crown four-poster beds. This was true both in the 16th and 17th century. During the 18th century, textiles seem to have replaced sculpted bed decoration. However, a single example survives, like this bed of Ben Bishop, where carving and sculpture in the style were carefully applied. Let us now take a closer look at the seating and its various needs. Whereas the carving of the 16th century chairs and tables was mostly limited to templates of races before the 17th century, it expands to include carvings that often consisted of angels of lion's head that decorate, for instance, the back post of the Spanish chairs you consider here. During the 18th century, the prescribed decorum of the various Louis styles was meticulously elaborated on the seats, chairs, armchairs, and canapés, as well as on various tables and consoles. In addition, from the late 16th to the 18th century, carving and sculpture on domestic furniture faced stiff competition from inlays. The use of precious and colorful woods and bone for the inlay, as well as several metals and mother of pearl for the marquetry, gave the newly fashionable furniture a lively and artistic appearance. Now, some words about influences. Single-handed drawings versus printed model books for furniture. Yes, there's parts, but that was the part. Unlike for ecclesiastical furniture, which will be discussed in depth by Pauline Wierlock, bitterly few drawings survived for domestic furniture in the southern Netherlands. It is worth taking a closer look at the scarce beds. Right away, one can distinguish between split sketches for an ebony woodworker, for example, and the fully drawn design that serve as models for craftsmen and their customers. A first anonymous 17th century sketch on the left concerns a cabinet with invitations for paired columns and capitals in the middle section. A second quick sketch by the Antwerp dealer on the right depicts the middle part of a cabinet. The portico is crowned by a broken triangle architrave on which two figures lie broadly down on the sides. Garlands and masks with fruit horns, as well as a kneeling figure, are provided for the base. Fortunately, the drawing of the masked roof of the Antwerp journals, you've seen it already, was also preserved. It is probably done by the hand of the then craft dean. This Buffy from 1694, with 4 doors and 100 columns, still possesses that angel's head at the center dome. This shows that carving was certainly not the most important part of the decoration. However, for the benefit of the future master cabinet maker, you can see it on the base, another plan of the buffet is added. Much more round sculpture can be seen on a careful ink-wash drawing by Hendrik van Soet, an Antwerp very famous ebony woodworker and protege of Governor Maximilian van Beieren. This cabinet for the Prince Bishop of Koblenz is crowned by a sculpture so-called Saint Spur of Trier, held by two hovering angels. At the ends of the upper cornice are two ornamental vases, and as side pieces, two more allegorical figures, namely of faith and hope, are conceived in an S-shaped accolade. The Antwerp sculptor, Jean-Baptiste Duvray, probably executed the carving. And just as a grip from the 18th century, we bring to attention sculptor Daniel Herrijn's neat drawing for a Louis XVI style chair from 1781. The decorum of the frame of the open-work backward center of the touch and the two legs differs on the left from the right. So the consumer could choose between the two options presented. It's noteworthy, however, that the drawing style looks academic and classics. Apart from loose autograph drawings or designs, the cabinet maker and sculptor could draw inspiration from printed model books with all types of images. Famous for our region is undoubtedly Hans Vredeman de Vries model book entitled Différents portraits de menuiserie, à savoir from 1583. It was marketed specifically for the benefit of joiners and of les amateurs de belles sciences, noting that Vredeman explicitly uses the word science. This printed model book by Vredeman was certainly not for the German Peter Plattner, already had a series engraved with carved furniture in 1546, and the Frenchman André Dussarceau did the same in 1550 and 1556. By no means all 16th century furniture types are included in Vredeman's work, and the then new fashioned models, such as Spanish chairs and cabinets, are completely absent. But pillars, volutes, scrolls, lid frames, lampreys, leaves, moss, and fruit can be recognized as carving motifs. The almost full plastic sculpture on the table behind shows sphinxes and wooden stars. Perhaps to the proposed sculpture, Vredeman wanted to revive the somewhat old-fashioned furniture types. For the 17th century, the book of his son Paul, with the title Histories, and so on, published in 1620, gives us a look at early 17th century furniture, and this time the models of his father are more embellished with sculpture. Still to come to the northern Netherlands. In 1621 and 1642, there was the important work by Crispijn van der Pas, entitled Officina Arcularia of the Schrijverswinkel. This now included realistic models of 17th century commonly used furniture, the carvings of some of which leave nothing to the imagination. French printed models from the 18th century strongly influenced the spread of new fashioned French furniture types. These types found their way into the interiors of the southern Netherlands. Think of the beautiful models of André Chateaubourg, as in this screen showing a bibliotheque, a bookcase topped by a broken segmental pediment with an ornamental vase flanked by two crowned angels. This print was included in the Paris publication Nouveau Dessin des Meubles from 1707. Another wealth of information is provided by Ernst Rubel, richly illustrated work L'Art de Menuisier from 1779, especially the second volume, entitled Le Menuisier en Meubles, inspired cabinet makers and was a useful guide. In conclusion, it can be said that the making of domestic furniture in the southern Netherlands was certainly a very complex matter, supported by an arsenal of craft regulations. Both cabinet makers, joiners, antique carvers, and sculptors received rigorous training. Their training, master examination, and rich instrumentation they were required to use provides abundant information about their knowledge and even the mastery of their science, so that their skill transcended pure craftsmanship. Influenced in part by their own Southern Netherlandish designs and model books, as well as foreign drawings and illustrated publications, furniture underwent quite an evolution and was valued according to the text by Antwerp art dealers by princes, dukes, counts, and lords of quality and condition. Now, may I hand over to Leon, and thank you for your attention.
So that sketches quite a few important things which I will just look at from a slightly different point of view, particularly that of sculpture in relation to ecclesiastic furniture, as you announced it. But before that, a few words more about the institutional context. In Antwerp, the Guild of St. Luke was founded before the 15th century to organize the work of several professions within the organization of the city. As for all other guilds, its rules were controlled by the city, and one of its principal ones concerned citizenship, so-called porterschap. It was obligatory for anybody wishing to engage in craft trade. The city authorities helped with the elimination of the black market of colleagues from outside, and they appointed the heads of the guilds, called the deacons. The guild also organized the training of pupils, the obtaining of masterships, and guaranteed the quality of work delivered by its members. To finance its various functions, the guild was paid according to the size of the workshop, in the form of a payment for every pupil that was engaged. Contributions to the church were also organized, in particular to finance an altar in the cathedral, which itself collected income from the sale of candles. The guild was further involved in the funerals of members and their wives, for which they received a death duty from every estate. The guild also promoted social cohesion. Part of its income was spent on meals, and it organized a special fund for modest help in case of illness. In the 17th century, the Guild of St. Luke in Antwerp included painters, silversmiths, glassmakers, embroiderers, engravers, book printers, and so-called beeldsnijders, image cutters, i.e. woodcutters, or antiekesnijders, as we've already heard the name, literally cutters of antique ornament. Cabinet makers had their own guild, which was often in competition with panel makers for painters, who were part of the Guild of St. Luke. Similarly, masons, stone cutters, and sculptors in stone, i.e. bildhouwers or image chiselers, were separate in the Guild of the Four Crowned Heads until 1606, when sculptors obtained a permission to join the Guild of St. Luke. And that followed long court action and intervention by Archduke Albert, who was the Governor General there. Low Countries together with his wife. This emancipation of sculptors, putting them on a par with painters, had important implications for them socially and professionally. They now belonged to the liberal arts, the distinction between sculptors in wood and stone having been removed, giving sculptors the freedom to combine media without having to recur to collaboration in a sterile, materials-oriented fashion. Gradually, the name of Bildtsnijder disappeared in favor of the name Bildhauer, or its superior variants, statuarius, or sculpteur, the one Latin, the other French, of course, although written in a localized way. Behind these names may be recognized as expressed on a human figure as opposed to ornaments. This emancipation was principally based on the assumption that drawing was the foundation of all art practice and was the common denominator of all the members in the Guild of St. Luke. In the 17th century, Antwerp became a magnet for sculptors, whereas in 1616, the Guild of St. Luke registered 574 members, of whom more than a third, i.e. 216 painters, there were only 19 sculptors. By the end of that century, the proportion had changed to one sculptor for every 3 painters. And in the first decade of the 18th century, one sculptor for every 2 painters. After the death of Rubens and Van Dyck, which is traditionally heralded as the beginning of the end of the golden age of Flemish painting, several initiatives were taken to circumvent the deteriorating artistic situation. The most important one was the founding of an academy in Antwerp, established by royal decree in 1663, on the initiative of the Guild of St. Luke and financed in an imaginative way. That sculpture was included shows how much the profession of sculptors had gained in status since they joined the Guild of St. Luke only 60 years before. Rubens's ideas on sculpture, stressing the community of painting and sculpture, certainly played a role in its emancipation and makes it the room of art, like you mentioned earlier. Teachers were recruited amongst the most respected and successful artists in town, including the sculptor Artus Quirinus the Elder and Peter Verbruggen the Elder. In emulation of Italian and French academies, teaching stressed the art of drawing, but it also included both the teaching of painting and sculpture, as the name of the academy indicated. Aspiring sculptors continued to be apprenticed for 4 years to a master sculptor to learn to model and carve in different materials, but the academy enlarged their training to a theoretical and practical level, including not only drawing classes after plaster cast and the living model, as you see here, in a print by Hispane de Plaster, but also in geometry and perspective. Most allegorized interior views of studios and academies are pieces celebrating the necessity of training and draftsmanship, as drawing encouraged an immediate and informal encounter with the work being drawn. The multiplicity of intentions in the act of copying another work may be summarized by the desire to record, to interpret, to criticize, and especially to learn. The typical stages a student went through are all shown, sometimes several of them in the same picture. Students copying prints and drawings, as in Jan Steens, a master correcting a pupil's drawing on the left, students copying plaster cast and anatomical works, such in Sweerts's and Jacob van Oost painters, a painter's studio. Adriaan van der Werf's self-portrait with a plaster cast here on the right stresses how much 3-dimensional works were essential to learn proportions in the human body. Here, a pair of compasses was useful, whereas in life classes, the eye alone had to do the work. And we said that if you put a pair of compasses on somebody's face, it will hurt. Let's talk about cabinet makers. The collaboration between cabinet makers and sculptors usually pertained more to a managerial than to an artistic logic for Antwerp production in the 17th and 18th centuries. The sculptors frequently executed pulpits and other relatively small sculptural ensembles, I say small, between inverted commas, as opposed to enormous choir stalls, for instance. All these ensembles in oak alone, as soon as the work involved was larger, collaboration became a prerequisite for a smooth and quick delivery of the sculpted church furniture produced to a high standard. Franz Baudouin has discussed this procedure with the examples of Jean-Baptiste Bouvard and Octavius Herriot. The contracted the choir stalls at the St. Jacob's Church in Antwerp and the Abbey Church of Adelboden, which you get in the image here, of which some of the sculpture is now at Val, and also at the Church at Groenendaal, the latter now in the church in Wildwell. For these large commissions, not infrequently produced within a year or two only, the cabinet maker was often the contractor with the church authorities, and then executed the straight and molded parts and subcontracted the sculptural elements to several workshops, while also organizing the supply of wood. In several cases, we only know the name of the cabinet maker, not of the subcontractor sculptors, which has led to substantial speculation as to the authorship of the sculpture. An even more complex and not infrequently large-scale operation was the production of a church organ. The organ builder, the cabinet maker, and the sculptor had to work together, often to the design of a sculptor or even an architect. A counterexample of a different type involves subcontracting by the sculptor. For instance, when in 1674, artist the young Villiers subcontracted the furniture parts of the execution of a pulpit and the delivery in the parish church of Ostend by Jean-Baptiste Bouvard. Then a nice example is given by Georges-Denis Bayard, who worked mainly from Namur in the mid-18th century, and who kept a wonderful document called Le Grand Registre. It is not complete, but it gives us a good indication of how a workshop operated. He informs us about the practicalities of such collaborations, which were adapted to a wide range of situations. With domestic furniture and medium-sized church commissions, he would deliver pieces of relief sculpture to be applied by the cabinet maker. For instance, he recorded what you see here in 1740, on 8th of October, achevé de lui envoyer la sculpture d'un confessionnal consistant dans les pièces suivantes: médaille représentant Saint Jean Nepomucène, un panier de festons, 4 chapiteaux de pilastres, 8 ornements de 10 pilastres, 4 autres piédestaux, etc. And then the whole thing for a specific price. At the other end of the scale, for the luxurious and richly sculpted choir stalls of a wealthy abbey, as for instance at Jean Blot, Bayard preferred to take the entire responsibility for the contract. For the library ceiling of the University of Leuven, now destroyed, I'm afraid, Bayard instead took half the responsibility, the other being involved to the cabinet maker Henri Bonnet. At the end of the project, Bayard worked out the finances and divided the profit in half. An alternative was used by Michiel van der Voort, the organ builder Vosselville, and the cabinet maker Peter Kuipers, who all established separate contracts with the church authorities. An example where no collaboration was involved is that of the choir stalls at Floref, where Pierre Enderlin, supposedly a sculptor of German origin, worked alone in situ, or at least supposedly alone in situ, for 16 years, from 1632 to 1648, on the choir stalls of the Northern Abbey Church. Obviously, an important determinant as to the choice of a sculptor exists if the abbot wishes to give another commission to him during the same time, and therefore the pulpit and the Rudolph were executed by another sculptor, Schleck from Lille. It should be remembered that sculptors were not automatically members of the Guild of St. Luke in all cities of the Low Countries. I've mainly mentioned Antwerp. In many, until the Renaissance and sometimes into the 17th century, sculptors had to choose between membership of the stonemasons or the cabinet makers guilds. In this, the collaboration between cabinet makers and sculptors was natural, as their profession had long overlapped. During the Renaissance, they were often called the antiques, that is, houses of antique ornament. A commission which is particularly well documented is the pulpit today in the Cathedral of Brussels, but originally created by Hendrik van Verbruggen from Antwerp for the Jesuit Church in Leuven. The Leuven Jesuits approached the Antwerp-based sculptor in July 1695. The Antwerp Jesuits probably did so, as the new rector of the Leuven College came from Antwerp and was appointed barely 2 months earlier. Moreover, 2 of Verbruggen's brothers had entered the Jesuit order. However, it was Father Aloysius de Bielsa who officially commissioned the pulpit and paid for it. Well, officially, and paid back to them. The written contract describes the different elements of the pulpit to be delivered by Verbruggen. It was required to provide a model. Unfortunately, the term is not specific about the medium, either drawn or sculpted, to be approved by the patron. That this commission for a church in Leuven went to a sculptor from Antwerp is surprising, considering the guild regulations of Leuven, which prohibited outside masters to deliver commissions and work within its city walls. It serves to underline the reputation of Antwerp and of this master in particular, as well as the close connections sought by a prospective patron when commissioning an expensive piece of church furniture, which was to serve an important function as well. On a local level, its purpose was mainly didactic, but more widely, these were propagandistic for a relatively recent Jesuit foundation. Indeed, it forms part of a newly built church proclaiming the strength and vitality of the Catholic faith, and especially the Jesuit order. The chronology of this commission strongly suggests that Verbruggen greatly appreciated its importance, and he did not wait long before embarking on the preliminary work. 2 terracotta sketches that have survived are dated 1696. In this, he must have been helped by Father de Bielsa for the elaboration of the iconographic program, as the Marino iconography is eminently anti-Jansenist. However, the 3 preparatory drawings showed the artist's creative mind well. They are a realization of his concepts, acted as a visual extension of his mind, and assisted with his imagination. And please note that the stairs on either side of the pulpit, those are much later and not part of the original work. So we should remove them from your view. This interactive process between mind and matter first took place on paper. The complexity and size of the projected forms of the pulpit played an important role in this process. The structure as a whole is conceived on paper alone, with a clear accent on the furniture elements, leaving the individual figurative parts for a later stage, namely the 3-dimensional one in terracotta. On the first drawing, Verbruggen starts with the furniture parts on top of the sounding board, adding in the different figures of the prescribed iconography, as well as decorative elements, such as cartouches and draperies on the next graph, which is not even on the picture that one. The last of the 3 excellent drafts remodels some details, such as the suppression of 1 cartouche on the tub, but more importantly, it defines the proportions of the different parts and their interrelationship. The modelli that survive are studied for the 2 main figures, which you see here, driven out of paradise. These figures had to be elaborated in 3 dimensions by the artist. The anatomy was then carefully delineated in the wooden end product. The garments and hair are taken more as exemplars by the executants, who must have felt more comfortable with these than the reproduction of anatomy in the oak. The latter comment, nevertheless, only derives from close comparison of the 2 versions in terracotta and oak. From the terracotta stage, it remains to speculate about the actual full-size execution of oak. It obviously does not survive, as it must have been very fragile. But Verbruggen did this on his own within 3 years, 1696 to 99, is almost certainly out of the question. The only thing we know from a contemporary chronicler concerns the assembly of the different parts in the church in Leuven. The pulpit had to be carved in Antwerp and brought to Leuven by boat, where it was officially offered for sale at the local Monday market, as if it were any ordinary piece of daily merchandise, i.e., woodlogs for burning, for instance. A lay brother offered to buy the whole lot of wood as if it had never been commissioned. The purpose of this, of course, was to make a loophole in the guild system and legally introduce the work of an artist who was not allowed to work in Leuven. So with this quite remarkable example, I'm going to end and hand over to Jean Denis to think about other contexts outside of Antwerp, which really function as a giving ideas, and to think about all these questions about guilds information concern in Paris. So the floor is yours.
Bon, ce sont des considérations générales sur la corporation des menuisiers et de menuistes parisiens. Donc, les menuisiers parisiens en siège et en meubles des XVIIe et XVIIIe siècles appartiennent en grande partie à de vieilles familles installées dans Paris intramuros et dont sont issus les fondateurs de la communauté des maîtres menuisiers ébénistes de la ville, faubourg et banlieue de Paris vers 1547. Néanmoins, bien que les menuisiers soient considérés comme des vieilles familles parisiennes, pour la plupart, il faut dire que le plus célèbre des menuisiers français en siège, qui est Georges Jacob, était provincial et né à Cheny dans l'Yonne et était fils de laboureur. Je veux dire que les cuisiniers ne sont même pas sénégalais. Jusqu'en 1675, les différents faubourgs de Paris disposent de corporations particulières. C'est à cette date que Louis XIV ordonne l'intégration de ces diverses jurandes à celle de Paris. Seuls restent indépendants les métiers jurés des faubourgs Saint-Antoine et Saint-Marcel. Formant juridiquement un seul corps, menuisiers et ébénistes exercent deux activités distinctes. Les menuisiers officiellement travaillent et façonnent le bois et en organisent l'ornementation. Ils sont les héritiers directs des huchiers du Moyen Âge et de la Renaissance, qui produisaient successivement ou en même temps les tabourets, les bancs tournis, les chaises simples, les chaises à bras, les cactoirs, les chaises à vertigèdre, les chaises dites aussi cathèdres, les coffres, les crédences, les buffets, les dressoirs avec un corps d'armoire en encadrement, les buffets à décor, les armoires, les lits à baldaquin, dont les sièges sont portés par des quenouilles, des colonnes, etc., sans compter les sièges de clients, ou sédia importé d'Espagne, qu'on va appeler plus tard, on ne sait pas pourquoi, siège d'agonie. Les menuisiers demeurent en majorité dans le quartier situé à l'ombre des abbayes Saint-Nicolas et Saint-Martin-des-Champs. Les artisans dont ils sont les plus proches sont les maîtres sculpteurs de l'Académie de Saint-Luc, eux-mêmes héritiers et imagiers du Moyen-Âge. À la même génération, il est courant qu'une famille compte des sculpteurs et des menuisiers, professions qui par ailleurs sont cumulables et complémentaires. Ainsi, Hugues Sambin, à la Renaissance, fut notamment maître menuisier et sculpteur à Dijon. Ce groupe, socialement bien délimité, pratique l'endogamie. Ses membres ne se mélangent que rarement avec ceux du deuxième groupe de la corporation. Nous avons dit que menuisiers et ébénistes forment un seul corps. Il convient d'insister sur ce point face à la régression de la connaissance, tant générale qu'universitaire et muséale contemporaine, constitué par l'affirmation qu'ébéniste et menuisier forment deux corporations différentes, ou qu'un ébéniste ne peut pas faire de la menuiserie et vice-versa. Georges Jacob produit des meubles en ébénisterie bien avant le loi Le Chapelier de 1791, et on pouvait penser que la question était réglée au moins depuis la fin du XIXe siècle. L'ébéniste pratique la menuiserie par la confection des bâtis. Le menuisier ne se limite pas à la préparation des bois, sinon son activité serait dérisoire. Il discute aussi, oui, et en petit. Voilà, là vous avez par exemple l'exemple d'une chaise qui n'a jamais vu un sculpteur, c'est-à-dire qu'elle est livrée pour la couronne, pour une certaine Versailles, et elle est entièrement liée au menuisier qui l'a simulée. Il n'y a pas d'intervention de sculpteur. Le métier de sculpteur, d'ailleurs, lui-même, est un métier libre. Et l'appartenance de l'un d'entre eux à l'Académie de Saint-Luc ne lui confère aucun privilège. Le menuisier n'est pas obligé de faire appel à un sculpteur. C'est libre, mais indépendant. Les menuisiers en ébène, plus simplement dit des ébénistes, forment un clan à part, sans autre lien que légal avec les menuisiers, sans alliance matrimoniale notable avec eux, en raison d'une préférence pour l'endogamie. Les différences essentielles tiennent à la nature de leur art et à l'origine géographique de la plupart d'entre eux. Les ébénistes s'appliquent à décorer les bâtis à l'aide de divers matériaux, essentiellement des placages ou de la marqueterie d'essence indigène ou exogène. En ce qui concerne les bâtis, naturellement, en cas de commande importante, comme celle que reçut BVRB2 pour la résidence de Mouly en 1732-1733, le maître peut sous-traiter une partie d'entre eux. Le plus grand nombre des ébénistes était issu de l'immigration en provenance de la Rhénanie, au sens large, et des Pays-Bas. Cette immigration fut d'une telle ampleur que l'on peut considérer aux alentours de 1750 et même avant que les dialectes allemands formaient la seconde langue vernaculaire du faubourg Saint-Antoine. Dans les années qui suivent la Révolution, cette différence, naturellement, tend à s'estomper, même si les noms à consonance germanique restent majoritaires chez les fabricants d'ébénisterie parisiennes. À partir de l'extrême fin du XVIIIe siècle, apparaissent aussi des noms d'origine italienne, comme Sormani, qui a fait d'excellentes copies du XVIIIe siècle. Il ne s'agit pas d'une immigration nouvelle, comme on en connaîtra plus tard, mais de descente. Ces Italiens sont les descendants des ouvriers de verre venus à Paris sous Louis XIV pour travailler à la manufacture de glace du faubourg Saint-Antoine, et dont les premiers héritiers furent les fabricants de baromètres et de thermomètres du XVIIIe siècle à Paris. Sans forcer le trait, s'impose le fait que la grande majorité des plus talentueux ébénistes parisiens sont des immigrés de la première ou de la seconde génération. Qu'ils soient maîtres ou ouvriers libres, ils se concentrent principalement dans le faubourg Saint-Antoine. Quelques-uns s'établissent à Paris, parfois après avoir atteint une certaine notoriété et souvent être parvenus au statut plus lucratif de marchand de meubles. Les artisans qui pratiquent sans être maîtres, pour telle ou telle raison, sont appelés ouvriers sans qualité. Pour la plupart, ils n'ont pu effectuer un apprentissage régulier, c'est-à-dire répondant aux règles établies pour accéder à la maîtrise. Pour pallier cette carence, lorsqu'ils en ont les moyens, les ébénistes achètent leur maîtrise. Régulièrement, à l'occasion d'événements particuliers tels que son avènement, son couronnement, son mariage, la naissance du dauphin et autres, le monarque régnant crée des maîtrises. Dans d'autres cas, par un biais ou par un autre, le pouvoir taxe les corporations qui, à chaque fois, pour financer l'imposition, obtiennent la création d'un nombre déterminé de maîtrises qu'ils vendent dans ce but. Parfois, ce sont ce qu'on appelle un don gratuit. Ces événements furent si nombreux sous Louis XIV qu'Henri en 1914 a pu écrire que la royauté vend le droit du travail. D'autres, comme Jean-Pierre Latz et Joseph Borner, achètent des brevets protecteurs de marchands privilégiés du roi suivant la cour du conseil du Seigneur. Tout ceci est une spécificité propre aux ébénistes. L'enracinement des menuisiers par la capitale et les cercles familiaux auxquels ils appartenaient les exonéraient de ces inconvénients. Emmanuel Coquery a écrit « Le règne de Louis XIII est une saison flamande, avant tout par la présence de l'ébénisterie, deux d'entre eux, acclimatés à Paris, Jean Germains, je le prononce très mal, dit Jean Armand, et Pierre Goll, dominent la régence d'Anne d'Autriche et le début du règne de Louis XIV. 2 décennies plus tard, émerge André-Charles Boulle, le plus grand ébéniste de son temps, immigré de la seconde génération, formé réellement par son père Jean-Bol, appelé Jean Boulle, originaire du duché de Gueldre, installé en France avant 1637. Particulièrement connu pour son activité de fabricant de pelles de roulettes, il enseigne à son fils de nombreuses techniques artistiques. Néanmoins, n'étant pas maître, afin que son fils dispose d'un apprentissage régulier pour accéder à la maîtrise au sein de la Gironde de Faubourg Saint-Germain, il le fait entrer à 14 ans chez son compatriote Jean Armand en 1656. Si Boulle se perfectionne auprès d'Armand, dans certains aspects de son art, il est difficile de considérer ce dernier comme son maître au sens intellectuel et artistique. On peut parler ici, comme dans bien d'autres cas, d'un apprentissage de complaisance. Quoi qu'il en fût, Boulle, en tant que maître à seulement 21 ans, passe déjà le 9 septembre 1663 un marché portant sur 2 tables en marqueterie. Il existe naturellement des ébénistes d'origine française, dont le plus éminent Charles Bressan, qui est un sculpteur de formation. D'autres patronymes pointent comme Boudin, Dubois, Durand, Garnier, Gérard, Leleu, Mijon, Montigny, etc., souvent d'origine provinciale et qui deviennent dans les faits marchands de meubles. La réussite la plus éclatante de la première moitié du XVIIIe siècle est celle de Noël Gérard, bon ébéniste et surtout brillant homme d'affaires. En 1723, il rachète le magasin général dont nous avons montré ailleurs la singularité. Établissement installé dans l'hôtel Jabac, il s'agit du premier dépôt-vente institutionnellement organisé. Son acte de constitution lui fait obligation d'avoir en permanence un stock de 100 000 livres, notamment en meubles, sièges et tapisseries. Ces livres journaux sont visés par le lieutenant général de police. Tous les litiges le concernant sont soumis à une commission extraordinaire du Conseil d'État du roi, ce qui est totalement extraordinaire en soi. Comme les ébénistes, les menuisiers sont astreints de marquer leur fabrication, et ce, dès le règne de Louis XIII. Depuis la nuit des temps, les menuisiers, sous le nom de huchiers, ont le monopole de la fabrication des meubles, tandis que les tapissiers participent à leur commercialisation. À la suite de nombreux procès opposant les uns aux autres, le Parlement de Paris ordonne le 5 décembre 1637 que chaque maître menuisier est tenu de marquer chacun de ses ouvrages de sa marque personnelle. Son usage se répand au cours de la première moitié du XVIIIe siècle et l'estampille devant être visible, les menuisiers choisissent de la placer à l'arrière des sièges, soit sur un des montants, soit plus facilement sur la ceinture, comme c'est le cas de Jean Mercier, actif dès 1690, dont un siège est présent dans cette salle. Je serais ravi de vous montrer la marque. Néanmoins, comme beaucoup de sièges sont peints et dorés, la présence de la marque est invisible, et c'est pourquoi l'estampille est placée au revers de la ceinture. Voilà, c'est terminé. Je vous ai montré ici, là, vous avez un très beau meuble sur le Bernard de Saint-Sauveur, et qui présente l'aspect assez inusuel et unique d'avoir un meuble à double pente, c'est-à-dire que les deux côtés s'ouvrent. Et ce qui est absolument remarquable, c'est que le bâti de menuiserie est fait par Bernard de Saint-Sauveur. Il n'est pas sous-traité, notre bien là la preuve, sur un meuble aussi extraordinaire que l'ébénisterie n'empêchait pas la menuiserie. Voilà, c'est terminé.
Merci. Nous allons maintenant procéder à la conférence de Valentina Chasseron, qui va nous parler de la menuiserie précieuse en dialogue avec les arts, un projet sur les politiques du XVe siècle de la Pinacoteca Civica di Savona. Merci.
Ah oui,
Parfait.
non, oui, ça, ouais, ça.
Bonjour, je voudrais remercier les comités organisateurs pour cette occasion. Cette étude est la première étape d'un projet de valorisation des politiques de la Pinacothèque civique des savants à travers un point de vue différent. La Pinacothèque civique des savants offre un extraordinaire noyau de majestueuses machines d'hôtel caractérisées par une précieuse menuiserie qui prend la forme des palimpsestes complexes auxquels ont collaboré plusieurs artisans. Ces œuvres sont un splendide reflet de l'heureuse saison artistique qu'a connue la ville ligure au XVe siècle, un port stratégique, vivant, où affluaient matières premières, artefacts, artisans et mécènes, aussi bien d'autres ports méditerranéens que des plus importants centres commerciaux transalpins, déterminant un langage artistique ouvert aux influences extérieures, même internationales. La promenade parmi les politiques du XVe siècle, pour la plupart conservées dans leur intégralité, que les musées des savants offrent à ses visiteurs, est surtout les résultats du mécénat stimulé par les deux papes des Savona, Francesco della Rovere, Sixte le IV, et son neveu, Giuliano della Rovere, Jules le II. À partir des années 1470, quand Francesco della Rovere est monté sur le trône papal, un ferment culturel et artistique s'est produit qui a permis à la ville de Savona de commencer à porter un costume original de la Renaissance. Les décennies centrales du XVe siècle coïncident également avec une période de croissance économique et sociale à Savone, avec le passage des territoires sous le contrôle du duché de Milan. Une croissance qui sera arrêtée née en 1527 par la conquête des Gènes, son concurrent dans la domination de la Méditerranée septentrionale. Les politiques de la nativité et de l'annonciation du peintre originel d'Alessandria, en Piemonte, Giovanni Mazzone, qui se font face dans l'une des salles du musée, provient de l'église rattachée au couvent de San Giacomo sur les hauteurs de Savone, dont la fondation fut soutenue par le cardinal Francesco della Rovere, peu avant son élection au trône papal. L'église devint en quelques décennies l'un des lieux de sépulture les plus convoités par l'aristocratie locale. Jusqu'à la suppression napoléonienne, elle est restée l'un des édifices sacrés les plus importants et les plus prestigieux de l'île. La douzaine de panneaux destinés à orner les hôtels des chapelles aristocratiques résume avec éloquence les panoramas variés de la peinture ligure dans les derniers quarts du XVe siècle. C'est le résultat des circuits complexes qui ne se limitent pas à la côte, par exemple avec la diffusion du langage franco-flamand depuis la Provence, mais qui impliquent des routes commerciales vers l'Italie du Nord et l'Europe du Nord, avec, en outre, des brèches décisives de la culture toscano-romaine. La prédilection pour la présentation d'images sacrées dans des cadres articulés est tout aussi évidente. Ceci implique une imbrication des savoir-faire et surtout pour les bois, des preuves de mimétisme. En outre, les mécènes s'attendaient à des rétables qui rivalisaient avec les arts somptuaires. Nous voyons ici les politiques de la nativité avec les saints Antoine de Padova et Bernardino da Siena, celui-ci avec un jeune garçon en habit de frère franciscain, une œuvre signée par Giovanni Mazzone et exécutée dans les années 1470 pour la chapelle de la famille Boccalandre. Puis, les politiques de l'Annonciation avec Sant'Ambrogio et San Girolamo, réalisées une vingtaine d'années plus tard pour la chapelle Pozzobonerli par le même artiste. Leurs cadres ont une disposition très similaire et sont caractérisés par des sculptures denses qui imitent un subtil treillage doré, conclu par des rosettes et encadré sur un fond de bleu outre-mer, d'arcs parrainés surmontés de feuilles froissées et d'édicules coiffées d'épinards. Comme l'a déjà publié Massimiliano Caldera l'année dernière, des témoignages iconographiques du XIXe siècle antérieurs à la restauration effectuée par Vincenzo Bigoni en 1897 permettent de voir comment, malgré les déplacements subis après la suppression du monastère, les œuvres ont conservé la disposition originale de leur cadre. Il s'agit de la célèbre gravure dans l'édition de 1848 dei monumenti di pittura, scultura e architettura della città di Savona di Tommaso Totteroli et des photographies prises par Secondo Pia vers les 1891. La restauration se limite à la reconstitution de la partie perdue au-dessous du panneau central, exécutée en imitant les rosaces ajourées des compartiments latéraux du politique de la nativité, et à l'insertion des flèches et des fleurons sur les cadres supérieurs, conformément à solution mise en œuvre par Mazzone lui-même dans les politiques de l'Annonciation de Santa Maria di Castello à Gênes. Réalisé en 1469, ce politique suit sans aucun doute l'illustre prédécesseur de ceux qui se trouvent aujourd'hui à la Pinacothèque. Il est également enchâssé dans un cadre de marbre dans le style de Domenico Gaggini, avec les mêmes éléments décoratifs comme des fins colonnes torses en fontaine à cuspide décorée, des losanges et des feuilles rampantes. Dans le cadre des affinités et des interférences de la sculpture en bois avec les domaines d'autres techniques, le contexte esthétique que l'on peut percevoir est celui d'un moment de coexistence entre les langages d'ascendance nordique et les nouvelles ouvertures de la Renaissance. Celle-ci provient principalement de la vallée du Po, surtout grâce aux innovations apportées par Vincenzo Foppa et peintre lombard, actif, comme nous le verrons plus tard, dans le même chantier décoratif génois où Mazzone travaillait. La formation de Mazzone a également été en contact avec les chantiers décoratifs du couvent de Santa Maria di Castello a Gênes. Là, les fresques qui couvrent les vastes surfaces des murs du cloître et des salles adjacentes révèlent la présence d'artistes venus de-delà des Alpes, dont Giusto de Ravensburg, qui a signé et daté l'extraordinaire Annonciation sur un simulacre de cartouche. C'est la somme de recherches picturales d'origine flamande connues en Ligurie depuis au moins 4 décennies. Outre les soins apportés par le peintre à la représentation de la précieuse facture des objets peints, on retrouve également certains détails décoratifs dans cet art sculpté, comme les feuilles froissées qui parsèment les arcs et les costumes. Des éléments que l'on retrouve également dans la production locale d'orfèvrerie d'une époque plus ou moins contemporaine. À partir du politique que Mazzoni a réalisé à Santa Maria di Castello à Gênes, on assiste à une tentative de reconstitution d'un espace unique, reliant compositionnellement les panneaux du registre principal, comme si l'ensemble constituait un seul organisme, et comme tel, peint et décoré. Un petit bâtiment ouvert par un portique gothique dans lequel sont placés les personnages principaux. Nous sommes donc en présence d'un atelier dans lequel la conception et la réalisation des parties peintes et sculptées sont étroitement liées. La composition picturale étant en fait conditionnée et déterminée par le cadre. L'atelier de Mazzone se configure donc comme un lieu d'expérimentation et de confrontation de la peinture et des arts plastiques. Les sculptures qui sont réalisées contiennent des figures qui ont une structure tridimensionnelle solide dans le rendu des parties anatomiques et des vêtements, dont les plis ont une consistance sculpturale. Certaines comparaisons ont également été faites avec des artefacts en bois encore présents dans la région. Et voilà une comparaison. Et d'autres comparaisons peuvent être faites avec des réalisations en marbre, par exemple des Michele d'Aria, un sculpteur d'origine lombarde avec lequel Mazzone partagera l'important chantier à Savon de la chapelle commandée par Sixte le quatrième, la Sixtine de Savon. Et voilà les monuments pour les parents de Sixte le quatrième, et puis la comparaison avec la figure de Mazzone. En outre, il a été rapporté plus tard que Mazzone avait essentiellement inauguré en Ligurie un nouveau modèle de rétable avec des parties peintes à côté des parties sculptées en ronde bosse. En 1463, Mazzone s'était vu confier l'importante commande du rétable, maintenant perdu, pour la prestigieuse chapelle du précurseur de Saint-Laurent dans la cathédrale de Gênes, celle qui abritait les précieuses reliques de Saint Jean-Baptiste dont nous venons de voir les coffres contenant les reliques. Les documents retrouvés et transcrits par Federico Lizzeri, érudit génois de la fin du XIXe siècle, rapportent que les rétables devaient représenter Saint Jean-Baptiste et d'autres images non précisées, mais que l'ensemble devait être enrichi d'œuvres et de figures en relief et sculptées. En somme, une menuiserie articulée, composée également de sculptures en bois selon les dessins remis au commanditaire. Dans le contexte de la commande d'un politique, l'importance de la concession de la menuiserie semble se manifester également dans la phase contractuelle. La description de l'articulation du cadre semble susciter une plus grande attention de la part du commanditaire. C'est les documents transcrits par Lizzeri, excusez-moi. Et comme l'a déjà noté Marie-Claire Galassi, d'un point de vue typologique, les projets graphiques de la chapelle du précurseur, malheureusement introuvables dans les différents documents connus relatifs à Mazzone, étaient probablement similaires aux dessins joints au contrat de commande du 24 mai 1480 pour un politique actuellement perdu de Bartolomeo d'Amico pour Calvi, en Corse. Dans ce dessin, seule la partie relative à la menuiserie, clairement dans le style de Mazzone, est détaillée, tandis que celle relative à la composition picturale est limitée à une sommaire indication iconographique. Les modèles des menuiseries est richement sculptés avec des flèches triangulaires surmontées de feuilles rampantes et des fleurs de lys, des rosettes avec des motifs à quatre feuilles et des trèfles. Il a été travaillé et largement utilisé par l'atelier de Mazzone et reproduit par d'autres ateliers. Et était encore en vogue en Ligurie au VIe siècle. Des œuvres encore présentes sur notre territoire en témoignent. Et nous voyons à la Pinacothèque les politiques de Lorenzo Fasolo, artiste lombard actif en Ligurie, a daté au début du VIe siècle et présente en effet une figuration simple, tandis que la menuiserie en bois continue à fendre la préciosité de l'orfèvrerie, comme dans les créations de l'atelier de Mazzone. La menuiserie des Mazzone avait manifestement été appréciée par les commanditaires et l'artiste était reconnu non seulement comme un maître dans l'art de la peinture, mais aussi dans celui de la sculpture sur bois. 13 ans après la prestigieuse commande de la chapelle du précurseur, qui comprenait déjà un mélange de figures peintes et en relief, il fut engagé pour concevoir et réaliser un ensemble architectural en bois qui devait servir de retable majeur toujours à l'intérieur de la cathédrale génoise, maintenant perdue. La structure s'articulait autour du coffre contenant les reliques de San Siro et comprenait également des statues rondes en bois et une sculpture de la Vierge en marbre. De l'atelier de Mazzone est donc sorti un produit fini dans toutes ses parties, signé par le chef d'atelier, membre de la guilde des peintres. L'artiste sera convoqué au tribunal en 1487. Les maîtres de l'âge se voyant spoliés d'une technique qu'ils considéraient comme leur. Il sera acquitté en vertu de la tradition de l'atelier de la fin du Moyen Âge, où les frontières entre les domaines respectifs étaient très peu marquées. L'argument de sa défense repose précisément sur le fait qu'à Gênes, dans le passé, les peintres ne s'étaient jamais vus refuser le privilège de sculpter le bois. Certains contrats retrouvés par Alizeri rapportent en 1401 Niccolò da Voltri, un autre auteur d'un politique aujourd'hui conservé au musée du Vatican, mais provenant d'une église génoise avec un cadre architecturé, s'engagea à réaliser pour la cathédrale de Nice un retable appelé Tabernaculum, qui devait mesurer 6 mètres de large et atteindre une hauteur de 4 mètres et demi avec la base. Un autre exemple d'artiste active entre Gênes et Savon dans la seconde moitié du XVe siècle, dont l'atelier présente une perméabilité similaire entre la peinture et la sculpture sur bois, est Vincenzo Foppa de Brescia. Comme Mazzone, il était déjà actif dans les années 1460 à la cathédrale génoise pour peindre à fresque dans la même chapelle du précurseur pour laquelle l'artiste d'Alessandre devait plutôt fournir le retable avec les figures en relief mentionnées plus haut. Les figures peintes à fresque par Foppa sont, en outre, les modèles que Mazzone doit égaler et dépasser dans les documents contractuels cités de 1463. Les retables conservés à la Pinacothèque civique de Savon et peintes en 1489 s'éloignent déjà des modèles locaux, modèles des matrices à la Mazzone élaborés dans les années 1460 et qui, comme nous l'avons vu, perdureront jusqu'au VIe siècle. Pour la chapelle funéraire de la chartreuse de Nostra Signora di Loreto, San Bernardino, à Savona, de Manfredo Fornari, comme l'indique l'inscription en bas au centre du panneau principal, Foppa a conçu une menuiserie disposée comme un arc de triomphe, d'une élégance classique et mesurée. On notera l'emplacement inhabituel du donateur en gibier, dont la figure est découpée par la colonne torse, ce qui sépare le compartiment central de celui de gauche. Avec ce stratagème, l'artiste tente de dépasser la division traditionnelle du polyptyque au profit d'une perception continue de l'espace au-delà de la menuiserie. C'est toutefois cette dernière idée qui est véritablement moderne dans les contextes ligures, plutôt que la composition et les rendu picturales. Le polyptyque a subi de nombreuses modifications et restaurations au fil du temps, y compris au niveau de la menuiserie. En particulier, certaines pièces ont été remplacées au XXe siècle. Un exemple frappant est celui de la grandiose machine conçue par Vincenzo Foppa pour l'ancienne cathédrale de Savona, financée par Giuliano della Rovere et achevée en 1490 grâce à l'intervention du peintre niçois Ludovico Brea. Après la démolition du prestigieux édifice religieux à la suite de la conquête génoise de Savona, les majestueuses polyptyques a été remontées à l'intérieur de l'oratoire de Nostra Signora di Castello, où il se trouve encore aujourd'hui, n'ayant subi que des modifications mineures et des pertes dues au démontage et au remontage et même à un incendie en 1909. La construction du complexe des menuiseries a précédé le travail de peinture car il s'agit d'une véritable architecture ornée et sculptée. nous voyons des particuliers. Une architecture habitée par une grande population de sculptures en bois, 22 figures sculptées. Et puis, en total, 14 en pied et en plein relief et 8 en demi-longueur et en demi-relief. Qui révèlent cependant l'exécution par différents sculpteurs et encore un certain syncrétisme culturel composé d'éléments de culture lombarde et nordique, mais avec un résultat étonnamment équilibré entre les parties sculptées, gravées et peintes. Pour l'extraordinaire lexique typologique de la Renaissance déployée, il s'agit également d'un changement décisif par rapport aux sculptures en bois contemporaines. Les mécénats réfléchis de la famille della Rovere donnent à l'intérieur de l'ancienne cathédrale de Savona un coup de pouce décisif au langage gothique tardif. Tout comme Sixte le IVe avait déjà introduit des modèles toscano-romains dans la construction et la décoration de la chapelle Sistine de Savona, la chapelle funéraire dédiée à ses parents, rompant avec la tradition locale, avait imposé l'exemple d'Andrea Bregno de Roma à l'atelier lombard d'Aria pour les monuments de Della Rovere qui s'y trouvaient. De même, les politiques commandées par son neveu rappellent fortement un monument funéraire mural de la Renaissance, tel que celui réalisé par Bregno pour la famille Piccolomini à Siena. Contrairement à son oncle, qui s'était adressé à Mazzoni pour la décoration picturale de la chapelle Sixtine, Giuliano a choisi la pointe les plus avancée de la Renaissance de la plaine du Pont, disponible sur place, en la personne de Vincenzo Foppa. Un parallèle peut être fait avec les magnifiques stalles de corps en bois modernisés dans les scènes de la Renaissance de la vallée du Pont, qui, à partir du début du XVIe siècle, sur l'ordre de Giuliano della Rovere lui-même, a remplacé celui qui venait d'être construit toujours dans l'ancienne cathédrale avec un riche répertoire d'arcs, de pousse-pieds, d'infralacs, de floraisons et de lobes, ainsi que des figures sculptées et en relief qui ont à voir avec les boiseries des Mazzoni. Suite à la réévaluation de la sculpture en bois du XVe siècle à l'occasion de l'exposition La Sacra Selva en 2004, il est apparu qu'autour de 1400, les paysages de les mers de la Liguria devaient être animés par des sculptures en bois venant de loin, en particulier du nord. En outre, tant à Gênes qu'à Savona, i bancalari e cassari, les deux figures professionnelles liées au travail du bois, nordiques étaient actifs au XVe et au VIe siècle. Parallèlement, la présence des sculpteurs lombards était très répandue. Cela expliquerait les syncrétismes constatés dans la menuiserie des Mazzoni et des Foppa, tout en tenant compte de la grande différence des goûts entre les deux. En ce qui concerne la réalisation de l'appareil sculptural de la majesté grandiose de Foppa, Federico Alizzeri estimait déjà en 1870 que les figures sculptées avaient été exécutées par Foppa. Il s'est basé sur une notice documentaire de 1488 qui voyait l'artiste de Brescia avec Bertolino della Canonica, un peintre originaire de Pavia, longtemps actif en Ligurie, fournir 4 sculptures en bois pour les rétables de l'hôtel de San Sebastiano dans la cathédrale de Gênes. Dans le naturel des manières de certaines de ces figures a été identifié le style de Foppa, et voilà les Saint-Jacques mineurs, mais aussi la distance par rapport à d'autres des autres sculptures. Foppa comme Mazzoni, concepteur, peintre et aussi sculpteur, ou bien s'agit-il de la rencontre et de la fusion des différents maîtres? La question reste certainement ouverte, de savoir qui faisait quoi au niveau exécutif. Au sein de son équipe, le peintre et chef d'atelier a-t-il seulement fourni les plans généraux et s'est-il occupé de la partie peinte ou s'est-il également intervenu de manière opérationnelle sur la menuiserie en taillant et en sculptant certaines de ses parties? La collaboration s'est-elle déroulée au sein de l'atelier ou y a-t-il eu un apport extérieur, par exemple une sorte d'association entre des ateliers spécialisés actifs sur le site. Si pour Mazzoni, il est probable que l'œuvre ait été entièrement réalisée au sein de l'atelier, il existe des cas documentés de collaboration. Anselmo de Fornari, que nous connaissons comme l'ébéniste des stalles du corps de la cathédrale de Savona, par exemple, a exercé la profession de sculpteur en 1502 à l'occasion de la commande d'un rétable pour une église des mineurs, dont la partie picturale était confiée à Ludovico Bria. À Savona, un sculpteur lombard collabore donc avec un peintre niçois. La réponse doit donc être déclinée au cas par cas, menuiserie par menuiserie, qu'il convient d'étudier en profondeur tant d'un point de vue documentaire que du point de vue de sa construction. En conclusion, les encadrements monumentaux que nous avons analysés reflètent comment en Liguria, leur concession et leur exécution étaient sans aucun doute au centre de la commande et un espace stimulant de dialogue et d'expérimentation, ouvert à l'interférence entre différentes sphères expressives, une synthèse des différentes traditions technico-opérationnelles et un véhicule pour la transmission des nouveaux modèles. Merci.
Non, j'ai toujours l'ancienne. Non, j'ai toujours l'ancienne présentation.
Next. I'm very happy that Isabel Hato, in Leiden University, is going to talk to us about an arms bench for the contest. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to thank your organisers of this symposium for their kind hospitality and also for the opportunity to speak about this very, very interesting piece of furniture. In modern parlance, it's called a broodbank, which means a bread bench, where bread was distributed to the poor. In the older sources, it is referred to as a high face stool, which means like a bench of the Master of the Holy Spirit, which suggests it's more like a pew. The bench. Oh, hang on. No.
Yes.
This one. Not that one. No? Oh, this one.
Yes.
Ah. Yes. The bench numbers 12 seats on the pinnacle canopy, and it has this one. Two richly carved bench ends with, on the left, when we're standing in front of the broodbank, an image of a family consisting of a man, a woman, and a child. And above it, you can see the image of Christ the Savior. On the opposite side, there's a man shown distributing bread and bacon to a disabled person on crutches, with above him Christ displaying his side wound. This piece of furniture is generally dated to around 1475, 1480, because the southwest corner of the nave, where it is presently located, was completed between 1417 and 1483. Of course, this date only holds true if the bench is in its original location. Furthermore, judging from the depiction of the distribution of arms to a disabled person on the right-hand side of the bench, oh, here we are, a bit closer, but, and freestone plaques commemorating endowments for alms distributions set into the side wall next to the World Bank. It is believed that the Master of the Holy Spirit distributed bread and bacon to the poor from the said bench, and the tradition has been revived in modern days. So here you have the distribution of the alms. On the right, you can see the freestone plaques, and they're put into the wall next to this bench. And today, they use it sort of at around Christmas time, and they sell special bread there to raise money for the poor. But upon closer inspection, all the previously held assumptions about this piece of furniture have turned out to be incorrect. What I want to do in this lecture is delve into the complicated history of the so-called bread bench, which unfortunately, due to lack of documentation, cannot be unraveled completely and all of the details. But what is clear is that throughout the centuries, it's been undergoing a metamorphosis, that it wasn't designed for its current location, and that it served a very different purpose than the one that is generally assumed. Previous researchers have always considered the broodband to have been made in one go. Although it was acknowledged that it was very heavily restored in the 19th and 20th centuries and fitted out with its front canopy, it was still believed to reflect its original appearance of around 1475. But that is a fallacy. Even a cursory examination reveals striking incongruities. The bread bench has 12 back panels, and they bear text referring to the 6 works of mercy. In their current form, therefore, they are Protestant, because in Protestant doctrine, there are 6 works of mercy, while in Catholic doctrine, there are 7. Beneath these back panels are 12 seats, and the front wall of the bench is wider than the back part, and the door is faced rather asymmetrically, with 16 panels on the left and 5 on the right. This little door has 2 panels itself, which is stylistically very different from all the others. There are 23 in total panels, that is. As you can see, well, maybe I should go back to this one. The combined width of the panels in front is much, much wider than the benches at the back. So that's rather strange. And then if you start looking at it, then it just doesn't work. Most of them are just these letter panels. These are very different, and this is an 18th century edition. Also, to set the piece of furniture into its present position between the corner of the aisle and the pier, there were bits added here. So these are 18th century, probably. And this whole angle is 18th century. Something like that. Another thing that's very interesting is that on the folding top of the front and the back panels of the bread bench, there's a lot of graffiti. And the graffiti at the back is different from that on the working board. And there's a latch which you can open up so you can actually get into the bench. Got very different graffiti again. There are also 3 very strangely inundated animals, 2 on either side of the doorway, and there is a 3rd one here in the corner. And these are very odd. I'll go back to this one, because this one has its side truncated, so it looks as if they were not made for this position. And there is no such figure on the right-hand side of the bench, where, as I said, woodwork isn't medieval. So, in 2023, 7 parts of the bench were sampled by Marta Domingos del Mas, and then chronologically dated, and I've got the overview over here. The lack of sapwood meant that it was only possible to approximate the felling date of the trees from which various parts were made approximately, except for number 2,
which is carved in Lithuanian wood. The other parts are made of wood from Poland and Prussia. The numbers 1 and 2 are the blocks on which these funny monsters are mounted, not the monsters themselves. Block 1 is from after 1434, block 2 from after 1449. Number 3 is the dragon against the wall. He is mounted on block 2. And he was made of wood that was sold after 1445. Numbers 4 and 5 are 2 boards from which the fourth text panel from the left was made. One of them dates 1417, the other 1463. And then we have the 2 bench ends, number 6 and 7. They were made of wood felled from a tree felled after 1425. They are thus the oldest parts of the bread bench, dating to around 1430 probably. And this mismatch with dates suggests that the bench has been tampered with and may not have been put together with parts that belong together originally. Unfortunately, we cannot trace the component parts of the bread bench, but for the funny little animals, we can make a suggestion. Here we are. They're different in style. This one looks decidedly later in date, younger than these two. And as I said, one of these has the side of it templated. So it looks as if they came from elsewhere and were reused. It's an idea I find supporting the style, dress, and posture of the monster on the right side of the great bench array. And he's wearing a tunic standing over his buttocks. He's curiously folded over with pointed shoes and a chaperon with a cloak attached. And these are costume details that indicate they in the late 14th or 15th centuries. Parallels for the figure are to be found on the elbow decorations of the choir stalls in the same church. He's not unlike this one here. He's absolutely completely folded over. He's very elongated, and you see the same sort of person, figure, a monkey in this case, with human legs, falling over, not quite as much as here, but with the same kind of dress on the north side of the choir stalls. Perhaps his feet with his own hands. And well, the oldest parts of the stalls were made in the early 15th century, but they were enlarged on several occasions, then partly dismantled to make way for the 16th century choir screen. We know that there was more of it than there is now. At the moment, you've only got these, the back part with the seats, and the whole front on both sides is gone. And we know that from we know that from a drawing made by Peter Saladon between 1634 and 1636. So the reading desks have gone, or are they? On the corners of these desks, if you look very carefully, you see strange elongated shapes lying on top. So I've been wondering whether they maybe come from here. It is conceivable that parts of this choir stalls will be used in the present bread bench. That could also explain the stylistic differences between the three monsters. Now, if we look at all this drawing image we've got of the bread bench, and that's on an engraving of 1762, which shows a piece of furniture that looks slightly different than today, and you see it on the left. It's got a classicist entablature, and it doesn't look particularly medieval. But all this photograph of the bench, which is on the right here, they were taken in 1875, showed that there were no seats at the time, and that all the funny little things in the corner, which you have on top and below, they were just not there. So that was a restoration, and God knows. And you can also see that this doesn't belong, because the graffiti goes behind it. So we know that these parts were added in 1894 when the bread bench was restored, and we know that in April 1902 the bread bench underwent another overhaul, and at that time that classicist entablature was changed to the present Gothic canopy. But it isn't only the composition of the bread bench that raises questions. Its location is also very problematic, because if you look at the oldest images and plans of the church, It's just not shown. It's not in the southwest corner of the nave. It doesn't feature in the work of Peter Sagadon, who showed that corner several times. You see, it's completely empty. There's nothing there. And this is the oldest plan we have of the church. This is from 1628, beschrijving en de lof der stad Haarlem by Samuel Ampsey. And he included a plan in his book, for which this is the original, the preparatory drawing, showing how the church was furnished in Catholic times. And it doesn't show it there. And although this is a very, very large piece of furniture, in fact, it can nowhere be seen on the plan. So this is the south wall of the nave. This is the west, and in the corner it should be there, but it isn't. The plan does, however, here, this angle, called a whole arrangement of little spaces, and it does mark the location of the sacristy of the Holy Spirit, which the for the Holy, so the sacristy where the masters would do things. And it also on the end marks a thing called the Heilige Geesttafel, so the table of the Holy Spirit, which is sandwiched between the church warden's room and the Holy Sepulchre. So over here. So here is number N. That was the table of the Holy Spirit. This is the Holy Sepulchre, and this is the sacristy. And here, he looks more like a U. It reads a little room where at certain times the poor people receive bread, dairy products, etc., from this table of the Holy Spirit, from the hands of the fathers of the orphanage. Well, that's a very small space. And if foodstuffs were distributed there, it was probably done through a window or facing the street, so it could have the poor waiting outside. But this room is so small that there's no way you can fit the bread bench in there. It's far too big. So it couldn't have stood there. It couldn't have stood here either, or in any of the other spaces, even if you chop it in two and put it on either side or something like that. It just doesn't work. The bench is far too large. So it's very likely that this table of the Holy Spirit was indeed a table, and it wasn't a bench at all. Also, as I said, there's a lot of graffiti on the bread bench. And graffiti you can only make if the piece of furniture is accessible. So that shows it must have been somewhere, not one of these small little rooms that were probably locked. So we must ask ourselves, where was this bench before it was placed in the southwest corner of the nave, and where was it located before? When did it actually get there? Now, in order to find out about that, we can look at the burial books, because they give a record of who owned which grave. Unfortunately, the oldest known burial book of 1608 is gone missing. The earliest one to survive is from 1688, and it currently lives to 16081, so we know that it existed. Next comes the 1707 burial book, with a corresponding plan of which I've shown a detail on the slide, and it indicates the position of the graves. And as you can see, in 1770, the breadbound is in its present location, and there are no adjacent graves. So this is the bread bench, and all the graves that may have been there have been removed. From the burial book of 1688, we know that there were graves on this position before, but that they had gone out of use around 1670. And that shows that, well, judging from the Saint-Madame paintings, which were made in 1630s, it wasn't there. The 1670, the graves that were there were removed. It must have been sort of positioned there somewhere between 1630 and 1670. So it must have stood elsewhere. Where and in what form? As mentioned, the graffiti shows that it must have been accessible to third parties. The question is, does that hold true for every single part of this piece of furniture? If we go into the history of the church, the 16th century stands out, especially the latter quarter of the 16th century. And in his memorial book, William Janszoon Ferrer was a Catholic administrator of the church, was also church master of the St. Bavo, gives a very detailed account of what happened in Haarlem between 1571 and 1581, when the church interior was attacked on 3 occasions. On 4 December 1572, a mob came into the church, attacking all statues, mass vestments, and other items, and so much is looted that only the baptismal font, 3 organs, and the choir stalls remained. A few months later, the church suffered another attack, during which the altars were demolished, and on 29 May 1578, the church was again plundered. And despite all this, despite Protestants not liking this to finish, these are still there, and they have hardly suffered any damage. You see a bit of damage, but it's negligible. How is that possible? If these representations of the 2 Christs were indeed in the church, they cannot have been visible there, as from 1578 onwards, the Church Council turned Protestant. And throughout the 17th century, the Reformed Haarlem Church Council was doing its utmost to get rid of anything that reminded them of the Catholic interior. In 1582, they targeted the statues above the church portal, they targeted the depiction of the Holy Trinity in the large west window, their drawers from Eftermo, Bishop of Peter, had donated to the church in 1541, and they removed the Holy Trinity from another window as well. 1622, the statues of St. Mary and St. Bavo on the exterior of the church were causing offence, as did many of the public idols present elsewhere in the city. A statue of St. Bavo was taken down in 1623. The only ones that remained were the St. Mary and St. Bavo high up on the exterior of the transept times, and these came down, St. Mary in the 19th century and St. Bavo in the 20th century, not because they were public idols, but to prevent further wedding. Because that, by this time, was sculpture was not important again. And it goes on. In 1642, the depiction of St. Mary was removed from the glass window in the church. In 1648, the call to pray for the soul on graves and chalices depicted in priest graves. They were all attacked and taken away. Paintings of St. Barbara and St. Martin were whitewashed, and even the small images of saints in the keystones of the vaults were plastered over so they couldn't be seen anymore. And this really raises questions how these 2 figures should have survived if they were standing in that southwest corner, that little bit above eye level, so that this man was there. And there is no way they could have been spared. In 1993, Tristan Buwer, a stupid remark that we shouldn't assume that what can be seen today in the repeatedly restored Bavo Church was there in the early 17th century. And I think that comment comes to the heart of the matter. At the time, the 2 Christ figures, and therefore the 2 bench ends, because these are in one piece, probably didn't form part of this piece of furniture. Either they'd been removed and temporarily stored away, or they came from elsewhere. And an argument in favour of the latter idea is a clumsy way in which the bench ends are joined to the back part. Really nicely done, and joiners were, well, that's me. They didn't make such a mess. So that's what could have been done in the 19th century, at a time that was hardly, as before that time, there was hardly any interest in letting it work. But where did this bench come from then? And there are several possibilities. These bench ends could have been part of the bread bench, but had been removed and stored away. And we know that in a church guide, 1915, it is said that the report said that the panels at the back partitions had been taken from their frames and hidden under the seat. Well, this is of course not the bench ends, but could have been mistaken. In any case, if that is so, they reappeared in the 19th or early 20th century. A second possibility is that the masters of the Holy Spirit moved the bench ends to their own institution, the Holy Face House, during the Reformation, to save them. And the third possibility is that they actually came from this institution, from the Holy Face House, where they had their own chapel, Where Geertruid of St. John's painted the 7 works of mercy. And you know that this tiny feesthouse retained its function until 1765. It was then demolished to make way for Hofje van Oorschot. It may be that after the dissolution of the Heilige Feesthuis, parts of the furnishings were moved to the St. Barbara Church. As actually, I think, was the case with the 3 plaques I showed you, which memorize endowments for distribution to the poor, because none of them mentioned the Barford Church, and they mentioned all sorts of other things. They mentioned Holy Spirit Masters, but no else. So they have little to do with the St. Barford Church. But if all this is so, and the bench and something elsewhere, how about the bench itself? Oh, this is the building I was talking about. This is where the Holy Spirit Masters had their lodgings. Well, the only thing that looks remotely like it is this bench here in front of the Honderslagerskapel. And it's shown on the drawing by Peter Sangedan dating 1637. It looks kind of medieval. It has the same paneling on 2 sides. There are 5 on this side. There's a few less here, but they're hidden behind the column. So it may be 5 here. And there's a sort of pathway in between. These are called Gothic arches and not the lettering that we have on the bottom. And there's this funny stuff on top, which looks very weird. Well, at first glance, there's no correspondence with the bread bench. And the detailing of the fronts, as I showed you, is different. However, the size is about the same. Because if you have 5 here and 5 here and 2 in the middle, you have 12 seats at the back. And this could be made later. So you just don't know. Interestingly, the later engraving after the Sangedan drawing does show similar paneling to the bread bench. Apparently, this was a medieval piece of furniture, and after Reformation, it was converted into a pew placed directly opposite the pulpit. The least this piece of furniture does is show that there were medieval furnishings in the church that could be used in the 19th century to form a part of the present bread bench and make it look more medieval. The availability of such spare parts is also attested in other sources. In 1883, Francis Allen says the present inhabitor of the bread bench, apparently made in later times, replaced an early one that was decorated with oak leaves, which, albeit in sorry condition, is still kept in the church for the purpose of using in due course when the restoration of the bench gets underway. And I already mentioned the 1915 guidebook, which talks about it's been taken out and stored away. So, to my mind, it looks as if this piece of furniture was constructed with all sorts of older parts in the 18th and 19th centuries and made this nice bread bench fitting in between the organ and the southern outerway of the church. But that does raise questions about the original function of the bench with its 5 seats. Because if you sit down on it, you can't hand anything out. You really can't. And the only way to hand out arms to the poor is if you stand up. And the space is very limited, I know, because I've been working on the graffiti there with 2 students. I mean, we're in each other's way all the time. It's so small, the room there behind the front. So it's very impractical. And if you start looking at the iconography of arms distributions, there are usually only 1 or 2 4 people involved in distributing things to the arms, to the poor, not 12 people. I'll show you some idea. This is a very old one. This is the table of the Holy Spirit in Ghent. And here's the pulpit sitting behind the bench. The next one is in Bruges, in the Church of St. Cross. And next you see a table outside. It's not in the church even. Just dispensing stuff for. And this is a Gothic portal of the St. Martin in Groningen. And here is a little building specially made for distributing bread and butter to the poor. So it seems that this whole bench thing was not meant for the distribution of arms and poor. It had a completely different function. It was for the masters of the highly stated city. This is why it was called the highly faced stool, a seat. It was a seat for these masters, which gave them status, which gave them a special place to sit. Probably on Sundays and feast days, because they had their own institution, their own chapel. For the other days of the week, they would be in full view of the community. And by sitting there, where everybody could see them, they would remind churchgoers of the good works that needed to be done to be permitted into heaven, and that in turn would have induced them to make donations to the institution. Yeah, it must have been located if the bench was for this purpose at all, somewhere in a location where people could get to it to make all the graffiti that we found on it. And so it wasn't in the choir enclosure. It must have been somewhere near the main parish altar, which stood in front of the choir petitions. So to conclude, my research has borne out that where the bread bench is concerned, scholars have relied blindly on the 1475-80 dating that is repeated in the literature over and over again since the 19th century, without taking the trouble to investigate whether this information is actually correct, without analysing the object itself, and the same holds true of the function. That again was repeated from what had been said in the 19th century. As shown, the alleged bread bench turned out to be a pastiche made up of different medieval parts, and it wasn't an alms bench at all, but as the medieval sources indicate, it is a high status pew in which the masters of the Holy Spirit were probably seated during Mass on Sunday and on feast days. And that shows that where medieval furniture is concerned, there is still very much to be gained from a thorough analysis, even of the best known pieces, in combination with the critique of the documentary sources, and, if possible, a really thorough, then not chronological analysis. And here I come to the end of my book.
Thank you. That was quite a role of five people speaking on extremely different and varied subjects, but somehow or another also think that would a little bit outside. Who wants to start the ball rolling with a question? Please.
Yeah, I would like to ask you, do you have good analysis done about the door on the hinges on the island of the hinges?
Oh, no, the island of the hinges, we have documentary sources, these are 19th century. The hinges are all new. The little door is medieval. And as is the note on top of it. But it is being chopped and all bits fitted on and taken off to make it fitting. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
It's for you as well. Yeah, you mentioned that the wood was very coming from China and very limited to products, but you haven't mentioned what sort of wood.
Also,
Oh,
yeah, I wouldn't use that.
And was all that oak ever left anything else than bare? Were there any remnants of the liquid? Anyone?
No,
Nothing at all.
no, we took
Cleaned off completely in the 19th century.
well, there was
If ever.
the back panel was painted black, you put all the text on it.
Mhm.
Then ladies we painting underneath it, but we couldn't find that. There's no completely anyone. Yes.
Other questions? No. I have the feeling you're ready for a coffee. Yes, let's go and do that and be back in 15 minutes. Lovely, thank you.
and welcome to our second session. Yeah, towards the third dimension in our seminar, Carpentry and Sculpture. It's a great pleasure to see you all here, and my name is Volker Seibert, and it's an honor to be here. And I want to thank Jean-Dominique and Leon for the preparation of this seminar, and we all for the hospitality. No? Our first speaker in this session is Dr. Constantino Ceccanti, an estimate architect and scholar affiliated with the Museo Nazionale del Barcello in Florence. Dr. Ceccanti has played an important role in the recent significant museographic and conservation projects at Barcello, including the reorganization of the sculpture rooms, bringing innovations and preservation to the presentation of one of the world's richest collections of Renaissance art. His expertise in architectural history, combined with hands-on project management, uniquely qualifies him to provide us invaluable insights into the intersection of monumental architecture and furniture. We welcome Dr. Ceccanti giving his talk titled The Wooden Inlays of Ambrogio and Nicolao Pucci, Rare Architects in Perspective. Dr. Ceccanti, yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this beautiful opportunity, and thank you very much to them and to the organization committee for this invitation and for this day. Okay, here, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My presentation today focuses on the inlay work, or tarsier, realized by two brothers from Lucca, Ambrogio and Nicolao Pucci, in 1520s, at a time when the city of Lucca was being transformed from an urban and architectural point of view to become a modern city by the architectural standard of Renaissance Florence. Before going into detail, it is necessary to briefly contextualize the world in which the Pucci brothers operated. Lucca was the capital of a small oligarchic republic, and it never was part of the Florentine state until 1847, in which, at the end of the 15th century, the activity of silk processing was still the main source of income for the oligarchic families who ruled the state. At the time, Renaissance architectural models began to arrive from Florence. The sculptor and architect Matteo Civitali from Lucca was the interpreter. With the so-called Tempietto del Volto Santo in the Cathedral of San Martino, in which there are numerous references to Florentine architecture, especially to the cupola of Santa Maria del Fiore, Matteo Civitali, who was the architect of the Tempietto, introduced Renaissance architecture into the Republic. Within a few years, thanks also to the desire of the main bodies of the state to renew the image of Lucca, the focus was on three urban areas that were to be revamped and became the symbol of the state. The first is Piazza San Michele, where one of the city's three largest medieval churches is located and had been the center of the city since Roman times. The southern side of the square was redefined with the construction of the new Palazzo Pretorio, or Praetorian Palace, designed by Matteo Civitali himself, and the Florentine sculptor Donato Benti, who executed the mullioned window decorations. The northern area of the square housed the so-called Palazzo del Decanato, the monumental seat of the Deans of San Michele, designed by another Lucchese architect, Francesco Marti. You can see the simple Palazzo del Decanato connected by an arch directly with the church of San Michele. The Palazzo Pretorio, due to its size and its richness of materials and decoration, was configured as the civil emblem of the state of Lucca, much more so than the Palazzo Pubblico, public palace, the palace seat of the government, partially still a building site. We shall see that the Palazzo Pretorio is the building most represented in the Puccis brothers' wooden inlay works. From an architecture point of view, it takes up the typology of the Florentine Palazzo Strozzi in a reduced form and with some variation. The Palazzo del Decanato, on the other hand, is development in land and has a simpler layout, indebted in this case to the Florentine Palazzo Serpini, designed by the Florentine architect Baccio d'Agnolo. Baccio d'Agnolo was at the time the architect of the most important Florentine families. It should not be forgotten, however, that the most important of Lucca's Renaissance building sites, which began in 1513 and was completed until 100 years later, was the construction of the new city walls, which should lead to enlargement of the city by means of new quarters, among which the southern and the southwestern one stand out. The second major area of Lucca's Renaissance urban reconfiguration was the Church of San Paolino. Designed by Baccio da Montelupo, a sculptor from Florence, who in the last years of his life went to Lucca and became an architect, and completed some years after his death in 1535. The building was the religious center of the Republic, decided and financed by government. The third area was the area near the Palazzo Pubblico, where the Church of San Pier Maggiore was located. This church, that we can see on the right, was probably begun by Baccio da Montelupo himself and was finished many decades later by the Lucchese architect Agostino Lupi, who proposed a facade derived directly from Sebastiano Serlio's theorization in table 54 of the fourth book. We can see the table on the left, and we can see that the two designs are very, very similar. It was precisely at this time of great renewal that the brothers Ambrogio and Niccolao Pucci, with carvers and architects, appeared on the Lucca scene. Lucca did not have, like Florence, a confraternity or guild of woodworkers at the beginning of the 16th century. In fact, it would not have one until 100 years later. The two brothers are initially documented in the area of the city's contado, the area around the city, and also outside the state, in an area reaching as far as the offshore of the Republic of Genoa. However, in the last 1510s, they received the commission for the two side doors of the Cathedral of San Martino, with flanked the central one by Matteo Civitali. We can see the porch, the medieval porch of the cathedral with the three wooden doors, the central by Matteo Civitali and the other two by Ambrogio and Niccolao Pucci. Above all, the right portal shows great compositional elegance and a refined skill in the representation of elements from classical antiquity. We can see this beautiful and very elegant detail. In the same period, the Pucci brothers replaced the missing ciborium in the church of Santa Maria de Servi, also in Lucca, and probably also provided the design for the marble altar containing it, which were clear references to the architecture of Baccio da Montelupo, but also to that of Matteo Civitali's Tempetto del Monte Santo. Apart from the church of San Pier Maggiore that we have already seen, the area of the Palazzo Pubblico was still at the beginning of the 1320s far from having a defined layout, and the building itself showed medieval features. You can see a design, a late medieval design, and we can see a medieval building. However, the government decided to intervene, and in 1522, the Pucci brothers were commissioned to make the wooden stalls for the Palace Chapel located in the southern wing. And this is the first of the 14 tarsia of the Pucci brothers. And we can read a description of the contract for the realization of the tarsiers, and now we can read. I have translated it from Italian. Ambrogio Pucci from Lucca was an excellent wood carver, as can be seen in the seats made in the chapel of the most excellent lords located in the Palazzo Pubblico, where various sacred figures and views are expressed in wonder, some of which some claim are straight of our city, but in our days somewhat different. At the end of the same seats towards the altar with the evangelic chords in a character of the same form, it is worthy of note to remember his name with the following words. And now Ambrogio described himself. Ambrogio Pucci or Lucca. The completion of this work was hindered by envious fate. His brother Niccolò, while still alive, brought it to completion in the year of salvation 1529, about 7 years for the realization of this work. And this is the southern wing of the Palazzo Pubblico of Lucca, as it appears today after the intervention of Bartolomeo Ammannati in the late 16th century. And probably the chapel was located in the left side of this wing of the building. But the chapel was destroyed during the renovation of the palace by Bartolomeo Ammannati. The uniqueness of the inlay work created by the Pucci brothers, of which there are 14 pieces, lies in the fact that, unlike many contemporary and older tarsia, they depicted imaginary landscapes. They represent clearly recognizable place in the city of Lucca. Their importance lies in the fact that the place most depicted is precisely Piazza San Michele, while the building most depicted is the Palazzo Pretorio, demonstrating how the intention was with these views to celebrate the good republican government in its capital. Now we can see 8 of the 14 tarsias as shown in the museum complex of Villa Guinigi in Lucca. And this one is an hypothetical reconstruction of the layout of the Tarsias in the chapel of the Palazzo Pubblico. In 1566, a disastrous fire led to the almost total destruction of the ancient Palazzo Pubblico, which was rebuilt in the following years through a design by the Florentine architect Bartolomeo Ammanati. It's very strange. Lucca was a state enemy of Florence, but in the 16th century, the most important architects that worked in Lucca were Florentine. It's very strange. In Lucca worked Ammanati, but in Lucca also worked Vasari. In Lucca also worked Jean de Boulogne. It's very strange. Already in those years, the inlay work was dismantled and moved to the church of Santa Giustina. And then, after this church destruction, they were transported to Villa Guinigi, the Museo Nazionale of Lucca, the National Museum of Lucca, where they can still be found today in a beautiful room. It's very interesting, the layout, the museal layout, the museographic layout of these Tarsias. Analyzing them, we see how, in many cases, the parts of the city depicted have not substantially changed since 1522. The first example. In this case, we can see the so-called Torre delle Ore. This one is the civic tower of Lucca, like the Frua, for example. Next, sorry, in this case, I can see the tower, the Torre delle Ore, Tower of Hours, from Piazza San Michele, with the Palazzo del Decanato, and also in this representation of the same square in the direction of the Church of San Paolino, we can see the bell tower and the spire of the facade of San Paolino stand out. This sample applies to the first of the two views of the Via Calderia, where the Palazzo Pretorio appears in all its elegance and modernity, as well to the second Tarsia panel with the same view. The inlay work in which the urban landscape is most different is the one in which the ancient Torre Pubblica or civic tower, and once placed in front of the Palazzo Pubblico next to the church of San Pier Maggiore, stand out. Even in the details, the Tarsia is rendered distinctive with reference to the symbols of the Lucchese state, such as the city flag on the corner of Palazzo Pretorio. You can see a detail with the flag and the digital reconstruction of the same flag with the two colors of the city of Lucca. In this slide, we can see another view, another detail of the view of Via Calderia, where we can see in the background the reconstructed corner of the Palazzo Pubblico. We do not know the name of the designer of this intervention, but we can see at the end an image of Renaissance building. But the presence of angular moonlit windows with two parts is also attested in 18th century drawing on the right, demonstrating how, albeit in a more discontinuous and uncertain manner than in Piazza San Michele or San Paolino, the government was also intervening in Palazzo Pubblico. And now, here we can see a reconstruction of the angle of Palazzo Pubblico before the intervention of Bartolomeo Ammanà. The inlay works also represented historical events of the time, such as the collapse of the church outside the city walls, San Donato, on April 9, 1516. And now we can see this interesting destruction. You can see on the left the Tarsia with a church with elements such columns on the ground, and now we can read the interesting description. The middle nave having remained standing with the roof rebuilt shorter after and with 14 beautiful and tall columns of Carrara marble on the 9th of April 1516 at 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, following on Monday, such a storm of wind that knocked down the roof with the said columns, which all shattered, which was a very serious damage for the church. This is the cause of the municipality of Lucca, which never wanted to expose said roof and columns. So, Lucca wooden intarsia skillfully used an assortment of European woods chosen for their color, grain, and natural constant. Lighter woods such as maple, lime, fir, and pine served for light surfaces, background, and areas in bright light. Pear and elm with warm tints and lively grain made volumes appear soft and warm. National, Italian walnut and oak, which are browner, define moldings, frames, and shaded areas. For the black, elder or other black, the local woods were used, never true exotic ebony. Cypress and chestnut were used in medium tone areas or as a filler. Color variety was achieved by exploiting the natural fire without covering varnishes. Each essence was cut and oriented to reinforce the perspective. Tues inlay work transformed simple boards into admirable architectural scenographies. In conclusion, the production of the Pucci brothers stands out as some of the highest achievements in the art of the early 16th century Italian intarsia. At the same time, their peculiarity is that they depict streets and views of the city of Lucca, thus becoming an element of self-celebration for the Republican government, which, in its chapel and in its palace, wanted to see part of the city reconstructed in the modern architectural language, demonstrating how the small capital was a city in line with its architectural time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Giganti, for this very clear and nice talk, and it was very nice to see the 16th century views and the present view one besides the other. Yeah? Are there any questions? Yes, please.
Yes.
May I ask you,
Yes.
do you know who made the design of the drawings of the video?
No, we don't know. Probably the same Pucci's, because they are defined by a document of the Archive of Lucca, especially Ambrogio Pucci, rare architects in perspective. So he was defined as architect, and probably Pucci was the designer of the probably. No, but the names could be or the same Pucci, or Baccio da Montelupo, or Nicolao Civitali. The names are the three.
Any more questions? Leon.
Question in the comment. I noticed that all the shutters, which are half or 3/4.
Yes, it's very.
Are the same, they're nearly the same. The other thing I also noticed is that you didn't get exactly the same views in your contemporary photographs because of the height.
Yes, yes, yes.
So it suggests that the image of the the Dacia, was starting from the first or second
Yes,
floor.
floor, yes.
And then you get even more mimetic effect of the shutters. Well, I'm actually in a building, looking through a window, well, the window's not there, it's only the shutters.
Yes,
And then you look onto the city from up above.
yes.
I'm
It's,
sure. Do you have any comparisons?
no, I have no comparison. I have seen that the point of view was located probably at the first or probably at the second floor. But today it's difficult to go upstairs and to take the picture. But I have noticed it, and it's strange that everything is taught like a window opened on the city.
No more questions.
Well, it's a question about the perspective, it's a linear perspective they use. And what was the source, well, in their group, that they.
We don't know.
Were they educated in that perspective system? Because it's very new at that time.
We don't have exactly informations about the formations of the brothers Gucci, but probably they worked with some of the most important artists that worked in Lucca at the time, such Bachelor Montelupo or Nicolaus Vitali, and probably they learned the art of the design and the perspective from there. But
But it came also from Florence.
yes, they all came from, yes, yes.
There was a connection.
Yes, from Lucca with Florence, yes.
Any more questions? So it's a pleasure to continue. And I may introduce Dr. Henriette Graf. She's a renowned expert in the field of antique furniture from the 17th to the 19th centuries. She serves as a curator of furniture at the Prussian Palaces and Gardens Foundation in Potsdam. She is publicly appointed and sworn expert for historic furniture. Dr. Graf's work uniquely combines meticulous historical research with hands-on craftsmanship, which she has cultivated since her apprenticeship in joinery. In the near future, her 3-volume catalog of all furniture of the Prussian Palaces and Garden Foundation will appear. Today, she will share her insights into the 18th century sculptural furniture from the collection of the Prussian Palaces and Gardens Foundation, Berlin-Brandenburg. Dr. Graf, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me here for this very interesting seminar. And thank you, Dr. Sabek, for this very friendly introduction. Well, I didn't do I don't know, Brandon say resonate on all the furniture, just the Federations ones, which are only 1,200 pieces, out from 5,000. So,
That's enough.
okay. Where's the button to? That's the one. Okay. From the beginning of the 18th century, the kings of Prussia had their residences in Berlin and Potsdam furnished at great expense. Apart from carved wall paneling, the sculptors produced furniture, wall tables, fire screens, chest of drawers, and seating furniture. An early example is probably the triart set for Queen Sophie Charlotte's rooms at Charlottenburg Palace, dating before 1700. So-called triart sets consist of a table, flanked by lateral gueridons, and a wall mirror. In this case, the wall mirror is unfortunately lost. The pieces of furniture were carved by Michael Döbel and varnished in the workshop of Gérard Daguerre from Spa, with whom you might be familiar. The columns of the gueridons and children's figures on the table are painted with white, with blue flowers. They are recorded in the inventory of Charlottenburg Palace in 1705 and belong to the lacquered objects that are painted in the eyesight porcelain style. That was really indicated in the inventory. It said it's painted in the porcelain style. So that's really the model for making such furniture. They were intended to imitate the appearance of blue and white porcelain. Such tree-art sets were widespread in the Dutch-English area around 1700. Here, the gilded carved elements with the pointed canvas leaves are characteristic for the Berlin area. The elongated figures, the design of the fingers and bonnet-like hairstyles are typical of the Berlin court sculptor Johann Michael Döber, who lived from 1635 to 1702. Gérard d'Agly lived from 1660 to 1715, came to Berlin from Spa in 1786 and produced a wide range of lacquer works for the Berlin court, which you might have seen in Berlin and other cities. In the following generation, only a few pieces of furniture were produced. However, this changed with the accession to the throne of King Frederick II of Prussia in 1740. In this year, Johann August Nahl, born in Berlin in 1710 and died in 1781, returned to Berlin from Strasbourg. He had worked on the Palais Rohan and was entrusted by King Frederick II with the interior designs and decorations in Potsdam. He probably carved the silver-plated chimney screen for the Potsdam City Palace. A small monkey sits at the base, hugging a palm trunk, and gazing curiously upwards. The sculptural power of the bouquet and the liveliness of the monkey's gaze are evidence of the sculptor's great skill. The Golden Gallery in Charlottenburg Palace is one of the ballrooms of the newly built new wing of Charlottenburg Palace. Nahl designed the ceiling and wall stucco work as well as the gilded furniture. The gilded benches have survived despite the destruction caused by the war, the Second World War. They stand on two pairs of legs at the front, with only one additional leg on each side at the back. The seat is very narrow and did not invite comfortable sitting. The open-work carved frame is remarkable. Bouquets, arches, and leaves wind their way along the supporting frame molding and do not inspire much confidence in the load-bearing capacity of the benches. Another characteristic feature of the period is the way in which the ornamentation is suspended under the frame, as it were. It looks like it had been just glued under the seat railing. But we're going to leave that again. Oops, no, no. Oh, I changed that here. I'm so sorry. The two pier tables in the small gallery of Sanssouci Palace are similar in design. They were made by the sculptor Matthias Müller from Silesia. His work is documented from 1744 and he died in 1773. Putti, lying next to a wine cask, play with grapes. Their legs are entwined with oak leaves. The vines allude to the motto of Sanssouci, the palace of the vineyard. The frame is just a narrow molding with pine leaves hanging from it. The legs clearly support the top, as can be found in English models. Here is a somewhat later example, an etching by Thomas Johnson, the English Rococo designer who liked to adapt Aesop's fable for his drawings. But my argument is that it's a specialty at that time for the Berlin carvers and sculptors to have just the rail and then kind of put all the ornaments, the sculpted ornaments just underneath. Again, yeah. The gilded desk stands unusually on three legs with a sloping tabletop. All of King Frederick's desks have sloping tabletops, which may have been due to his short-sightedness. The frame on the sitter's side, which is the left slide, the frame on the sitter's side has two drawers, one above the other, and is arranged so that there is legroom on the left and the right. The other two frames, which you see on the left picture, the other two frames are pulled far down, providing a large surface for a gilded chalk paint to create leafy tendrils and an ornamental cartouche of leaflets and a raised rippled edge on a diamond line. Next, I will show you a chest of drawers on a pair, veneered with juniper wood and silver-plated fittings. It was made by the Potsdam cabinet maker Johann Heinrich Hülsmann. He was born in 1688 and died in 1760. He came from Hagen in Westphalia for the Potsdam City Palace, to work for the Potsdam Palace. The chest of drawers was made according to a sculptor's design, and the cabinet maker acted as a sculptor, so to speak. The curved lines on all edges and surfaces are remarkable. While the top drawer still has a strictly horizontal structure, the contours of the bottom drawer follows the shape of the chest. Lines and surfaces begin to correspond with each other and intermingle. Rococo has begun. Hülsmann has made another pair of chests of drawers based on the same design, this time with rosewood veneer and gilded bronzes. They were also supplied for the Potsdam City Palace. Their outline can be traced back to a design by Johann August Nahl. Nahl had made a sketch for the concert room in Sanssouci Palace, which envisaged a wall table or chest of drawers. You can't really decide what it's supposed to be, one or the other. A chest of drawers under the wall mirror in the center. There is no doubt that the strong curve of the chest of drawers legs and the indentation below the top can be traced back to this idea. Gilded chest of drawers are exceptions in the history of furniture. The sculptor Matthias Müller made a pair. One piece was intended for Sanssouci Palace, which still stands there today on its original spot where it was made for, and one for the king's mother, Queen Sophie Dorothea, for her rooms in Berlin Palace. The drawers are arranged horizontally, with only the side galleries swinging in the Rococo rhythm. The form may have been inspired by a design by the sculptor Johann Michael Hoppenhaupt. He was born in 1685 and died in 1751, and came with his brother, of whom we're going to talk about later. They came from Merseburg in south from Berlin. The contours of the drawers are, as well as the gilded brass handles and the shape of the feet, are reproduced here. This could be due to the fact that Hoppenhaupt's designs were published widely as etchings in the years 1752 to 54, when Hoppenhaupt only received few commissions because the king was at war. He was away and had no commissions for his artists. The interplay between the chalk paint and the gilded handles in brass and cast brass is remarkable. In a long sweeping row, arches cover the front in luster and matte areas. Respectively, the two small gilded and silvered writing tables were made as pairs. The gilded example stood in the King's Library in Sanssouci Palace, and the other in the King's Library in the Potsdam City Palace. They have sloping panels covered with fabric, a tribute to comfort and the short-sightedness of the king. The sketch of Na's wall treatment from the concert room, which you saw before, may again have provided inspiration. The one with the central cartouche on the frame is very similar. Here too, the high frame provides space for a frame with a large ornamental motif. Johann August Nahl was commissioned to create a sort of seat furniture for the bedroom and study in the Potsdam City Palace. He made a sofa with upholstered side bolsters and 6 armchairs. It is the earliest sofa for the king, who later commissioned several more for the new palace. A sofa is much more comfortable than a canopy due to the upholstery of the side bolsters between the seat and the backrest, which a canopy hasn't. It's open on the sides. It is fully upholstered with soft cushions and protects against the drafts at the sides. The armchair in the ensembles the armchairs are again carved in open work with eye-catching armrests. From the backrest to the frame, they sweep in 4 uninterrupted arches and so to call epitomize Federation Rococo. The designs of Johann Michael Hoppenhaupt were used again and again. As an example, I will show you a pair of chest of drawers that still are to be found in Ansbach Castle in Franconia, which is in the north of Bavaria. They were probably purchased by a member of the Hohenzollern family who resided in Ansbach. They have 5 drawers at the front, which are framed with fine brass moldings. These drawer frames continue along the sides. The slanted pleats are decorated with sturdy decorative bronzes. These are key pieces for clarifying the respective contributions of the artists involved in the production. The invoice of Queen Sophie Dorothea's private coffer from December 1755 shows the division of labor between the cabinet maker, a certain Johann Schilansky from Berlin, the sculptor, Johann Michael Hoppenhaupt, and the sculptor and designer, Johann Michael Hoppenhaupt, and the bronzier, a François Verdaille from Paris. The production process was as follows. The cabinet maker Schilansky produced 2 models for the bodies for 140 Reichsthaler, according to Hoppenhaupt's design. Hoppenhaupt had received 30 Reichsthaler for his design. Schilansky adapted wax models of the bronzes to these to the carcass of the chest of drawers. For that, he received 12 Reichsthaler. The wax models were again supplied by the sculptor Hoppenhaupt. The finished model, molded and gilded bronzes were eventually supplied by François Verdaille for 190 Reichsthaler. So that's the highest amount of money which is due to the gold, of course. The somewhat squat shape of the chest of drawers, which were possibly also used as pedestals for heavy sculptures, was based on Hoppenhaupt's design. If you push the drawing together, you see the original one on the left, and then I pushed it together miraculously. The 2 outer halves formed exactly the Ansbach chests of drawers. The same design was used for other versions. A polychrome version has survived, which may have been made for a member of the court in Berlin, as the inventories preserved today do not mention a painted chest of drawers. It is related to the Ansbach chests of drawers by the boldly carved studs and the contours of the drawers, which are then continued along the sides as well, which is, to my knowledge, to my taste, a really unique idea to have the content of the drawers on the sides as well. King Frederick II's most comprehensive commission to his artists was the construction of the new palace at the western end of Sanssouci Park in Potsdam. It was begun immediately after the victorious end of the Third Silesian War in May 1763, and the king took his first coffee there with friends in 1765. And the magnificent inauguration, which lasted several days, was celebrated in the summer of 1768 with operas, theatre plays, and fireworks. So if you imagine, it's really a huge palace which had been erected in the time of just in 6 years. It's absolute amazing and tremendous. The most invented sculptor was certainly Peter Schwitzer, active 1752 to 1772. He came from Strasbourg. He carved 2 pier tables with herons for the concert room in the king's apartment. Those herons are so lifelike that you can literally imagine them in motion, turning their necks in a graceful curve to peck fruit with their beaks. A somewhat less talented sculptor was Gerhard Lamprecht Buschmann from Bremen. He supplied a silver-plated pier table for one of the bedrooms, which impresses with its abundance of varied ornamental motifs. However, they are less delicately carved than Schwitzer's work but radiate a great sculptural power. The composition of the console table with the light bearers sitting on the top from the lower concert room of the new palace is impressive. Johann Christian Hoppenhaupt, the younger brother of Johann Michael Hoppenhaupt, he lived from 1719 to 1785, is the designer, whereas the executing artist is Johann Melchior Kambli, who lived from 1718 to 1784 and came from Zurich to Potsdam. Kambli was a cabinet maker, sculptor, goldsmith, and entrepreneur who came to Potsdam in September 1740. And this year, 1740, is kind of a crucial date. It's the year when the king succeeded to the throne, and it's the year when the king published several annonces in several German newspapers where he asked artists to come to Potsdam and to contribute to all his palace building and furnishings and etc. That's why all the sculptors which I cited, they came all from different regions of the then Germany. In 1752, Kambli founded the Manufacture des Bronzes, where French foundrymen and builders worked. They probably supplied all the cast and gilded bronzes for furniture or wall panelings on royal permission until their decline around 1780. Unfortunately, we have hardly any documents about the makings and the makers of that manufacture. This console table once again features strong forms whereby it is a sign of artistic quality when the central decorative pieces of the bridge correspond with the hanging ornamentation of the frame, which we're going to observe by the next console table. Again, another sculptor from abroad at the time was Friedrich Mundt from Strausberg, which was then in Silesia. Of Friedrich Mundt, we know hardly anything. He was active just in 1767. He was also one of the more creative sculptors, as the gilded console table again shows the correspondence between the shapes of the bridge and the hanging ornamentation of the frame. The bridge swings far back, almost to the wall. The shape of the legs, of which the arches lead into the frame and are joined there by a further arch, is as elegant as it is imaginative. Johann Christian Hoppenhaupt was an early proponent of neoclassicism, as his wall tables for the upper gallery of the New Palace from 1768-69 suggest. He was both the designer and the sculptor of these tables, which blend in with the forms of the wall design. The characteristic forms are ram's heads, laurel hangings, and only slightly swaying arches. The next big construction adventure of the king was to build the new chambers next to Sanssouci Palace. They were created between 1771 and 1775. The same artists as in the new palace were commissioned to carve the sculptures. They carved the wall tables, seating, and paneling. There are no documents that could provide precise information about the direction of the individual pieces of furniture. The new chambers were intended for the accommodation of court members traveling from Berlin to Potsdam. Neoclassicism had now prevailed here. No arches, no flowers and leaves, but straight lines are now the style of the time. Oh, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Perl, for this wonderful presentation of so many furnitures, and we are glad we did so. All of them. But it was very interesting to see furniture, sculptural furniture and furniture with sculpture.
Right.
And I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.
And waiting for your questions.
Great.
Yeah.
So you showed a console table with two torch-bearing figures,
Mhm.
which make me think of the Chaumière episode, in which hardly any examples survive. Was that instruction original, or was it a bit placed on?
But it's the console table and the figures are in relief and actually part of the frame of the river.
So the whole thing is one
Yeah. Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
And does that reflect something on the other side of the room, or you have it?
Well, not really on the other
Yes.
side of the room because there are huge wall paintings, but on the other wall of it, and there the mirror goes down to the floor, and there stood the big piano, the wall, the light bearers are kind of the ones who give light to the musicians. That's it. Yeah.
So there's no connection with the complex.
You know. The fireplace is on the other side of the, not.
You speak about l'atelier of bronze.
Yeah.
In Berlin. Have you some detail?
What?
Have you some detail about this?
Well, it was, Johann Melchior Kammler suggested King Frederick to establish a manufacture of bronze, which was, allowed to do, and the king allowed it to do, in a time of like 2 weeks time. He just, signed it and he did it. And the argument why he should establish a manufacture of bronze in custom was that they would make their own bronzes and they wouldn't have to buy them for a lot of money for this reason from other countries, and that they could provide other countries with their own manufactured bronzes. So it was a mercantilistic, it was an economical idea as well. And he wanted to make kind of prototypes of furniture, pieces of furniture, which he would sell in the other German countries as well. That was the idea behind it.
Yes. But I thought, what is the date?
1752, February
17?
52.
It was before the Catherine of the Second.
You did what?
It was before Catherine the Second in Russia.
In St. Petersburg.
Yes, made
Yes.
exactly
Yes.
also the same in big bronze and also in
Well, we know who the Gonzis were. They came from Paris. They were kind of commissioned in Paris, but about the real work there, the process of working together and making them and what they cost, you don't know anything there. There are no documents. Maybe they just Put them into the fire.
Any more questions? So, thank you. I conclude this. Nothing to say except tomorrow is the next half of the seminar. So, look forward to it. Thank you.